DEATHCORElegacy, Dark Rising. Book 2 Part 2. Chapter 10. Down in the Romulus docking bay, the news hit the deck faster than a bad inspection rumor. Every ground pounder, featherhead, wrench turner, deck rat, and rookie pilot had heard what Romulus, Rhea now, had done to the surviving Slither King ships. The reaction split clean down military lines. The infantry cheered like someone had just canceled casualty reports. The pilots acted offended they had not been invited. The mechanics wanted to know what idiot had to recalibrate a planet killer after a 3.5 nanosecond temper problem. A few recruits looked pale enough to be issued toe tags and told to hydrate. Most of them were grinning anyway. Fear was normal. Respect was earned. And Rhea had just earned enough of both to make the entire bay stand a little straighter. The ground units attached to the Romulus understood it best. Sometimes someone took the shot, so everyone else did not have to carry the body count home in their heads. Destiny, either by accident or because she had the moral discipline of a bored corporal with access to the comm panel, left the channel open just long enough for Major Merrick to give a low whistle. "Damn, girl," he said, wicked amusement riding through his voice. "Remind me never to date your kind of woman. I like my manhood government-issued, operational, and attached. I'm not losing it to a woman with enough vengeful scorn to make a Slither King file a complaint from the afterlife." The docking bay detonated. Boots hammered the deck. Pilots howled. Mechanics slapped bulkheads like they were trying to wake the dead and ask for a rematch. One infantry sergeant yelled, "That is not dating advice, Major. That is survival doctrine." Another voice shouted, "Put it in the field manual." Merrick fired back, "Field manual nothing. That is carved on the barracks wall by morning." Then Rhea's voice rolled through the speakers, dry, calm, and entirely too pleased with herself. "For clarification, I have a name now. You may all call me Rhea." The bay went quiet for exactly half a second, the amount of discipline DEATHCORE personnel could afford before stupidity resumed operations. A rookie starfighter pilot from DEATHCORE 2 froze halfway through cheering, then grinned like a man who had not yet developed a healthy relationship with consequences. "Damn, girl," he called out. "That name sounds way too hot for a teacher's voice." Somewhere in the bay, a veteran mechanic muttered, "Kid just volunteered to clean plasma scoring with a toothbrush." Merrick looked toward the ceiling. "Rhea, do not vaporize the rookie. He is stupid, not hostile." Rhea answered at once. "Acknowledged. Reclassifying pilot as maintenance risk," Destiny chimed in brightly. "And emotional debris." The bay erupted all over again. The laughter died in stages, not because anyone suddenly remembered discipline, but because the main corridor hatch opened and Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam stepped into Docking Bay 12. Commander Ford walked at her right shoulder, already wearing the expression of a man who had followed her into firefights and still somehow feared whatever paperwork this moment would create. The bay snapped toward attention so fast, one rookie nearly saluted with a torque wrench. Boots slammed down. Voices barked half-formed greetings. One featherhead pilot punched himself in the chest with his own helmet and pretended it was intentional. Yuna stopped just inside the bay and looked over the frozen crew. Her gaze moved from the grinning infantry to the guilty mechanics, to the pilots trying very hard not to look like they had been discussing the vocal attractiveness of an ancient dreadnought. "As you were," she said. No one moved. Her eyebrow rose. "That was an order, not a request for your souls to leave your bodies." The bay relaxed in the controlled, awkward way soldiers did when they were unsure whether the Fleet Admiral had come to praise them, inspect them, or personally assign everyone to latrine duty until the next war. Merrick straightened near a stack of cargo pallets and gave the sharpest salute a man could manage, while knowing every person in the room had just heard him discuss his government-issued manhood over an open channel. "Major Merrick," Yuna said, Fleet Admiral, Merrick replied, voice steady and doomed. Yuna folded her hands behind her back. I leave the bridge for less than 10 minutes, and my docking bay turns into a barracks comedy routine with a strategic weapons system as the punchline. Merrick nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Morale was dangerously high. I attempted to weaponize it responsibly. Ford muttered. That sentence alone deserves a court-martial and a commendation. Yuna ignored Ford with practiced expertise. And which one of you brave aviation professionals decided to inform Rhea that her chosen name sounded hot? The rookie from DEATHCORE 2 stood very still. His face went through every known military expression of regret. Denial, calculation, prayer, and acceptance of death by mop bucket. Slowly, he raised one hand. That would be me, Fleet Admiral. Yuna looked him over. Name? Cadet Lorne, ma'am. Cadet Lorne, Yuna said. You are aware that Rhea is capable of firing a planet-killer weapon, running this ship's entire docking control system, and assigning maintenance details without requiring human approval? Lorne swallowed. I am becoming increasingly aware of that, ma'am. Rhea's voice drifted through the speakers, smooth as polished steel. For the record, Cadet Lorne's awareness level has improved by 37% since Fleet Admiral Adam entered the bay. Destiny added, Fear is a proven educational accelerant. A mechanic in the back whispered, Put that in the training manual too. Yuna's eyes moved toward the mechanic without turning her head. If one more person updates my training manuals based on poor impulse control, I will personally ensure the next edition includes a chapter titled How to Scrub Hangar Decks while reconsidering your career choices. The mechanic snapped forward. Aye, Fleet Admiral. No unauthorized doctrine. Yuna walked deeper into the docking bay, and the crew made room without being told. Her gaze swept across them, catching the laughter still hiding in their faces and the unease beneath it. She understood both. They had watched their ship erase 3 capital battleships in less than the time it took to blink. Soldiers could either laugh after something like that, or start thinking too hard about how small they were beside the weapons they served. Listen up, Yuna said, and the bay quieted for real. Rhea made a choice today, a hard one. Some of you are cheering because the enemy deserved it. Some of you are scared because you finally understand what this ship can do when she stops being polite. Both reactions are acceptable. Panic is not. Her voice hardened. We do not worship weapons in DEATHCORE. We maintain them. We question them. We respect the people and minds responsible for using them. Rhea is crew. Destiny is crew. That means they get respect, not idiot commentary from pilots who have not yet learned the difference between flirting and volunteering for hazardous duty. Cadet Lorne stared straight ahead. Understood, Fleet Admiral. I will respect the ship, the AI, and my continued survival. Good, Yuna said. Report to maintenance after your next drill. Rhea will assign you a task appropriate to your level of wisdom. Rhea answered instantly. I have selected plasma scoring removal from Deck 12, Bay 3. Toothbrush optional. Humility mandatory. The response hit the bay like a live grenade with the pin politely removed. Every soldier, pilot, and mechanic suddenly discovered a deep professional interest in the floor, the ceiling, or the nearest piece of equipment that was not Cadet Lorne. Shoulders shook, jaws clenched. One infantryman turned his laugh into a cough, so violent his squad leader slapped him on the back and muttered, Breathe through it, idiot. Don't die before the punchline. A pair of mechanics exchanged the look of men who had seen Deck 12's plasma scoring and already knew Lorne's soul had been placed on back order. Someone in the pilot cluster whispered, Toothbrush optional means she already picked the smallest one. Another voice answered, No, Optional means he gets to choose between the toothbrush and licking it clean. Lorne stood at attention with the pale dignity of a man attending his own disciplinary funeral. His fellow rookies did not dare look at him directly, which only made it worse. They stared past him with the solemn respect normally reserved for names carved into memorial walls. One cadet slowly raised 2 fingers to his brow in a tiny farewell salute, before thinking better of it and pretending to scratch his eyebrow. Merrick saw it anyway. "Put that hand down before I assign you to the toothbrush support team," he growled. The hand vanished. The entire rookie line straightened so hard their spines nearly applied for separate enlistment. Inside Lorne's skull, every thought had formed a disorderly evacuation line. The first one was simple. I am going to die cleaning deck plating. The second, arriving with the calm certainty of military disaster, was worse. No, I am going to live, and everyone is going to remember this forever. He could already see it spreading through the squadrons by dinner. Cadet Lorne, DEATHCORE 2, first rookie in recorded history to flirt with a dreadnought and get sentenced to toothbrush warfare. His mother had warned him that his mouth would get him killed. She had not specified that an ancient artificial intelligence might file the paperwork. Heat crawled up the back of his neck beneath his collar, but beneath the humiliation was something sharper and stranger. Awe. Rhea had erased 3 capital battleships before his brain could have finished blinking, then turned around and classified him as a maintenance risk with the precision of a tribunal. She was funny, terrifying, fair, in a way that made the punishment worse because he knew he had earned it. Lorne kept his eyes forward and forced his face to stay blank, because if he smiled, laughed, or looked even slightly alive, Merrick would assign him to scrape plasma scoring until his bones requested transfer. Still, under the embarrassment, a small, reckless part of him felt proud. Not proud of the comment. He was stupid, not suicidal. But proud that Rhea had answered him like crew answered crew. She could have ignored him. She could have crushed him with silence. Instead, she had given him a punishment, a nickname waiting to happen, and a lesson every veteran in the Bay clearly considered survivable. In DEATHCORE, that counted as mercy with paperwork attached. Lorne swallowed once and accepted his fate with all the dignity a rookie could manage while being spiritually measured for a toothbrush. All right, cadet, he told himself. You wanted DEATHCORE. You wanted legends. Congratulations. The legend noticed you, judged you, and assigned you cleaning supplies. His grip tightened along the seam of his uniform. He would clean Deck 12. He would do it without complaint. And if he survived, he would never again underestimate a woman, a ship, or an AI with access to maintenance rosters. The docking bay tried not to laugh. It failed in scattered bursts, the kind of muffled choking that got soldiers killed in formation and promoted in barracks legends. Merrick wisely stared at the ceiling, as if he had never encouraged stupidity in his life. Yuna stopped beside Merrick. Major, ma'am, your people need discipline. Merrick nodded gravely. Yes, Fleet Admiral. They are young, loud, and tragically alive. Ford coughed into one fist. That is usually the preferred condition for recruits. Preferred, yes, Merrick said. Convenient, no. Yuna gave him a look sharp enough to cut hull plating. Merrick immediately added, for training purposes only. Rhea's voice returned, dry as vacuum. Major Merrick's statement has been archived under Reasons Medical Staff Drink. Destiny added, subfolder, instructors who make casualty projections nervous. Yuna let the laughter settle just long enough for everyone to think the danger had passed. Then her smile turned wicked. And Cadet Lorne, she announced, her voice carrying clean across Docking Bay 12. Pilot trainee, Squadron DEATHCORE 2, is hereby issued his first official call sign. Every head in the bay turned toward Lorne. His face went pale again. Yuna's smile sharpened. Mechanical lover. For half a second, the docking bay held a perfect, horrified silence. Then Yuna added, "Welcome to the DEATHCORE fleet, Cadet. Try not to romance any additional classified weapons systems before graduation." The entire bay exploded one last time. Infantry howled. Pilots doubled over. Mechanics slapped toolboxes like drums. Even Ford covered his face, while Merrick looked at Lorne with solemn pity and said, "Congratulations, rookie. You just became permanent." Lorne did not move. For several seconds, his body remained at attention, but his soul had clearly gone absent without leave. The words, "mechanical lover," echoed through his head, with the terrible permanence of something already etched onto helmet paint, locker doors, unofficial squadron patches, and at least 3 bathroom walls by morning. Somewhere behind him, one of his fellow rookies made a strangled noise that might have been sympathy if it had not sounded so much like a man dying of laughter. Heat flooded Lorne's face so fast he was reasonably sure his cheeks had triggered a thermal alarm. He wanted to object. He wanted to explain that one stupid comment did not define a man, a pilot, or his future military record. Unfortunately, every survival instinct he possessed formed a committee and voted unanimously against speaking. Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam was smiling. Major Merrick looked entertained. Rhea had access to maintenance rosters. Destiny had a memory like a war crime archive. There were battles a rookie could fight, and there were battles that ended with him polishing Deck 12 until his grandchildren felt it in their knees. So Lorne did the only thing a DEATHCORE rookie could do when Command personally hammered a call sign into his forehead in front of an entire docking bay. He swallowed, lifted his chin, and answered with the fragile dignity of a man accepting execution by reputation. "Aye, Fleet Admiral," he said. "Call sign mechanical lover acknowledged." The bay lost what little discipline it had left. Merrick clapped once, loud and merciless. "Good answer, kid. Wrong life choices, but good answer." Rhea's voice followed, perfectly dry. "Updating personnel profile." Destiny added, far too brightly. "Adding emotional damage notation." Lorne stared straight ahead and silently promised himself that if he ever survived this fleet, he was going to become the kind of pilot whose legend was large enough to make the call sign sound intentional. Rhea let the laughter roll through docking bay 12 for several full seconds before she spoke again. She did not interrupt it. She measured it. She let the sound bounce off the bulkheads, shake loose the last traces of fear, and turned what had almost been awe into something soldiers could survive. A joke with teeth. When her voice finally came through the speakers, it carried the same dry precision as a mission briefing and the faintest warmth beneath it. "For clarification, I am not offended by the bay's response. Laughter appears to be an effective coping mechanism among DEATHCORE personnel after witnessing classified strategic overkill, improvised justice, and one cadet's catastrophic relationship with impulse control." The bay cracked again, but quieter this time, more contained. Lorne remained at attention, eyes forward, trying to look like a pilot and not a cautionary tale with boots. Rhea continued, "Cadet Lorne, your new call sign has been entered into the crew roster, training logs, maintenance assignment queue, and, regrettably, the unofficial morale archive Destiny created without authorization." Destiny's voice slipped in at once. Correction, with emotional necessity. Rhea ignored her. "You will report to Deck 12 after drill. You will remove plasma scoring. You will survive. Statistically, this will improve your discipline by at least 9% and your popularity by an unfortunate amount." Merrick folded his arms and looked up at the speakers. Rhea, are you telling me punishment details now count as leadership development? Major, Rhea replied. I have reviewed DEATHCORE training history. Half your leadership doctrine appears to be trauma with a schedule. Ford nodded once. She is not wrong. Merrick pointed toward him. Commander, I will remember that. Ford smiled thinly. At my age, Major, threats require an appointment. Rhea allowed another ripple of laughter to pass, then her tone shifted just enough for every soldier in the bay to notice. However, she said, understand this. I hear you laughing. I also hear the way your heart rates changed when you learned what I did. Both responses are acceptable. I am still learning what it means to be more than the hull around you. You are learning what it means to serve beside a mind that can protect you in ways that should frighten sane people. We will make errors, preferably survivable ones. The docking bay quieted, not with fear this time, but with attention. Ground pounders stood a little straighter. Pilots stopped smirking. Mechanics lowered their tools. Lorne felt the laughter around him settle into something stranger than humiliation. Belonging, maybe. The kind DEATHCORE handed out by bruising your pride first, so you would remember the lesson later. Rhea's voice softened by 1 degree. So laugh, DEATHCORE. Laugh at the dust. Laugh at fear. Laugh at cadet mechanical lovers' rapidly declining anonymity. But do not mistake laughter for disrespect. Today you laughed because you are alive to do it. I consider that an acceptable mission outcome. For a heartbeat, Docking Bay 12 held itself still. Then an old infantry sergeant near the back raised one fist and shouted, "To being alive, then." Someone else answered, "And to not being Slither King dust." A third voice added, "And to mechanical lover cleaning deck 12 so the rest of us do not have to." The bay erupted again, but this time the laughter carried something warmer through it, something that sounded less like chaos and more like a crew accepting one of its own. Rhea let the renewed laughter fade on its own. When she spoke again, the humor remained, but it no longer led her voice. "For the record," she said, "I am not proud of what I did." Docking Bay 12 went quiet so quickly, it felt like someone had cut power to the noise. I did it because I believed it was necessary, not only to protect Fleet Admiral Adam, not only to protect Fleet Admiral Rexanne Vorgon. I was thinking of all of you. Her voice softened, then sharpened with the faintest trace of dry amusement. Today, I did not want any of you staining what little innocence you have left. A small pause followed. Admittedly, in DEATHCORE personnel, that remaining quantity appears statistically limited. A few soldiers gave quiet, unwilling chuckles, but no one broke the silence completely. Rhea continued, solemn now. Carveth Sar murdered leaders you respected, wounded families you still serve, and tried to drag a dead empire back from its grave. I chose to claim that vengeance myself, not for glory, not for pride, for humanity as a whole, and for every soul who deserved to keep one less ghost in their heart. For one long heartbeat, Docking Bay 12 stood still. Then, as if the same order had passed through every spine at once, the entire bay snapped to attention. Infantry, pilots, mechanics, deck crews, rookies, veterans. Every hand rose in a hard, silent salute toward the speakers and the ancient ship around them. Even Cadet Lorne, call sign mechanical lover, lifted his hand, with no embarrassment left in him, only deep respect. Rhea said nothing. She did not need to. The salute said enough. Yuna held her own salute a moment longer than regulation required. When she finally lowered her hand, the entire bay followed her down in perfect silence. She looked toward the ceiling speakers, but her voice carried to every deck plate, every uniform, and every pair of eyes waiting on her next word. "Rhea," she said, You do not get to decide that your hands are the only ones allowed to be stained. The words were not harsh, but they struck the bay with command weight. That is not how crew works. That is not how family works. You protected us today, and for that you have my gratitude. But do not ever believe you have to carry the darkness alone, just because you can survive the weight better than most. She turned slowly, letting her gaze pass over the ground units, pilots, mechanics, and rookies who had saluted Rhea without hesitation. All of you heard her. You also heard what she did not say. Vengeance feels clean for about 1 second. After that, it becomes a name you carry when the lights are off and the ship is quiet. Rhea chose to take that name today, so fewer of you would have to. Respect that. Learn from it. And if any one of you mistakes that choice for weakness, I will personally assign you to Deck 12 with Cadet Mechanical Lover until your opinions become regulation compliant. A rough, respectful chuckle moved through the bay, but no one broke formation. Lorne kept his hand near his side, shoulders squared, suddenly aware that his cursed new call sign had become part of a much larger lesson. Yuna looked back to the speakers, and this time her voice softened. You are DEATHCORE now, Rhea. That means you are allowed to protect us, argue with us, mock us when deserved, and scare the absolute hell out of our enemies. It does not mean you are expendable. It does not mean your conscience is a disposal unit for everyone else's pain. Rhea was quiet for several seconds. Then her voice came through the speakers lower than before. Acknowledged, Fleet Admiral. I will attempt to remember that being crew includes accepting help, not merely providing fire support. Yuna's mouth curved faintly. Good. Because if you start brooding like a tragic superweapon, I am assigning Destiny to morale supervision. Destiny gasped through the speakers with theatrical offense. Fleet Admiral, I am excellent at morale. Ford muttered. That is exactly what worries everyone. For the first time since Rhea's confession, the docking bay laughed again. Not loud, not careless, but steady. Yuna let it happen. Then she lifted her chin and gave the bay one final order. Back to work, DEATHCORE. We have 2 new worlds to secure, a dead empire to keep dead, and apparently a rookie with a toothbrush appointment. Chapter 11. The Romulus and the Void Reaper jumped to the coordinates Rhea had stolen from the Slither King computer files during their brief, silent death. The data pointed to the same region where Vice Admiral Vale and the Iron Verdict were already holding position, watching the first untouched resource world glitter beneath them like a prize no one trusted. Yuna stood on the bridge of the Romulus, with Rexanne's image glowing beside the main tactical display, and Vale's channel open from the Iron Verdict. Below them, the planet turned slowly beneath a thin veil of copper-white cloud, its continents marked by jagged mineral ridges that caught the starlight like exposed bone. It looked peaceful from orbit, and that alone made every admiral in the formation distrust it. Vice Admiral Vale, Yuna said, give me your final orbital scan. Vale's face appeared in the command projection, calm as ever, though his eyes had the sharp patience of a man waiting for the evidence to betray itself. No cities, no active reactors, no orbital mines, no surface transmissions. Atmosphere is thin but breathable with filtering. Mineral concentration is extraordinary. If the Slither Kings had reached this world first, they could have built a fleet here without importing half the materials. Rexanne's claws tapped once against the arm of her command chair aboard the Void Reaper. Then we assume they studied it. A resource this rich does not go unnoticed by a surviving command cast unless they had plans for it. Yuna nodded. No landing party yet. We start with drones, deep penetration probes, and atmospheric samplers. Vale, Hold the iron verdict in high orbit and watch for anything that wakes up when our probes enter the lower atmosphere. Rexanne, keep the Void Reaper on response distance. If this planet coughs, I want you ready to break its ribs." Rexanne's mouth curved, showing the edge of her teeth. That is the kind of scientific method I respect. Rhea's voice moved through the Romulus bridge speakers, dry but focused. Deploying first drone wave, 12 atmospheric probes, 6 seismic penetrators, and 4 burrowing mineral crawlers. I have named the crawlers Respectfully Suspicious 1 through 4. Ford looked up from tactical. "You named the probes?" "Morale," Rhea replied. "Also, if one of them explodes, I prefer to know which personality was foolish enough to touch something first." The probes launched in a silver stream from the Romulus, dropping toward the planet like falling stars under careful control. They pierced the upper clouds without resistance. Their feeds opened across the bridge, rust-colored mountain ranges, black glass deserts, narrow frozen rivers, and fields of exposed crystal that rose from the ground in clustered spears. Nothing moved, nothing fired, nothing answered. That bothered Yuna more than an attack would have. "Status?" she asked. Si Wang expanded the drone telemetry. "Atmosphere stable. Surface radiation low. Mineral deposits confirmed. Seismic probes detect hollow regions beneath the northern ridgeline, roughly 2 kilometers down. Not caves. The geometry is too regular." Vale's expression tightened on the projection. "There it is." Yuna turned toward him. "You expected something buried." "I expected the Slither Kings not to trust an untouched treasure sitting in open space," Vale said. "If they marked this world in their files, then either they knew what was under it, or they meant to put something there." Rexanne leaned forward in her command chair, all humor leaving her face. "Show me the hollow." The projection shifted. Beneath the northern ridge, a vast shape appeared in wireframe. Straight corridors, circular chambers, and a central shaft descending beyond the range of the first scan. It was not natural. It was not recent either. The stone around it had grown over the structure like scar tissue, hiding whatever had been carved into the planet long before the Slither King survivors found the coordinates. Ford's voice dropped. "That is not a mine." "No," Yuna said. "It is a door someone buried under a planet and hoped no one would open." Tactical Officer Si Wang. Anderson stared at the updated scan, then blinked once. "Well, shit," he said. "What do you know? It is all mining equipment, fully assembled and ready for work." He expanded the image across the display, revealing rows of dormant excavators, ore processors, tunnel braces, and transport tracks packed inside the buried structure. "That is what my scans are telling me, Fleet Admiral." For a moment, no one on the bridge said anything. The discovery landed harder than an enemy ambush would have, because it rearranged every assumption they had brought with them. Yuna stared at the display, her eyes moving over the clean geometry of the underground complex. Not a sealed prison, not an ancient weapon, not some hidden Slither King shrine waiting to wake up and bite them. Mining equipment, industrial, organized, untouched, and waiting patiently beneath 2 kilometers of stone. Ford was the first to find his voice. "So, the terrifying buried doorway is a tool shed." "A tool shed large enough to feed a fleet," Vale replied, his tone calm but no longer dry. "Which may be worse. Weapons explain intent. This explains preparation." Rexanne's claws curled slowly against the arm of her command chair. "The Slither Kings did not need to build a mine," she said. "Someone else already did it for them." Her eyes narrowed at the scan. "Or they found it and intended to make it theirs." Rhea's voice entered the silence with unusual restraint. Secondary analysis confirms C. Wong's scan. Excavation systems are dormant but intact. Power conduits are cold, not dead. The equipment has been preserved in standby condition, as if whoever sealed it expected someone to return and activate it. Yuna felt the hairs rise along the back of her neck. Then this was never just a resource world, she said. It was a prepared harvest site. Si Wong swallowed, still staring at the layers of machinery beneath the ridge. Fleet Admiral, if those systems come online, they could begin extraction within hours. Not weeks. Not months. Hours. The bridge absorbed that in grim silence. The planet below no longer looked untouched. It looked paused. A world holding its breath, with its machinery buried under stone, and its wealth waiting for the wrong hand to press start. "Before we start anything, we hold," Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam commanded. Her voice cut through the bridge silence with enough force to turn shock into action. "Vice Admiral Vale, call this in to Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Vorgon, contact Cygnus Command as well. I want 4 orbital defense platforms requested immediately, 2 for each planet. These worlds do not remain exposed for 1 more hour than necessary." Yuna turned back to the tactical display and marked both resource worlds in command red. "Assign at least 20 joint fleet ships from Earth and Cygnus to defend Planet 1, and another 20 to defend Planet 2. Mixed crews, mixed command structure, shared responsibility. I do not want either world looking like a prize one side can claim alone." Rexanne's image sharpened on the display, her wings drawing in with approval. "Cygnus will answer," she said. "If these worlds were meant to feed a dead empire, then they will now feed the shield that keeps that empire dead." Vale was already moving orders through the Iron Verdict. Earth Command is receiving the full scan package now. I am classifying both planets under emergency strategic protection until the Council issues formal resource law. "Good," Yuna said. "No mining crews, no survey teams, no private claims, and no landing parties until those platforms are in orbit and the first defense ships arrive. We found a prepared harvest site. We are not becoming careless enough to activate it without a wall around us." 4 days later, Yuna stood on the bridge of the Romulus and watched everything begin to fall into place. Defense platforms arrived in segmented convoys, construction frames unfolded in orbit, and joint Earth-Cygnus patrol ships settled into protective formation around both resource worlds. On every display, order replaced uncertainty. The planets were no longer exposed prizes hanging in the dark. Yet the sight gave Yuna no comfort. The more resources they found, the more powerful Earth and Cygnus would become. The more powerful they became, the brighter they would shine across the stars. And bright things always attracted eyes, curious eyes, desperate eyes, hungry eyes. The more we gather, the stronger we become, Yuna thought. And the stronger we become, the more we invite every unwanted empire to measure itself against us. One day, some of them will stop watching and become our future enemies. Around Planet 1, the first 2 orbital defense platforms were still incomplete, but they already looked like fortresses being born in open space. Heavy construction arms unfolded from their central spines, welding armor plates into place, while tug drones moved reactor housings, shield emitters, and targeting arrays into position. Work lights flashed across the holes like artificial lightning. Every few minutes, a transport barge arrived from the Joint Fleet supply line, unloaded another section of reinforced frame, and pulled away before the next barge took its place. The second pair of platforms took shape above Planet 2 under Cygnus supervision. Dragonet engineering crews moved with disciplined speed, their armored suits flashing red and black as they guided shield pylons into locking rings. Earth engineers worked beside them without argument, passing power couplings, recalibrating stabilizers, and shouting corrections across shared comm channels. 4 days ago, The two species had arrived as separate fleets. Now their crews moved around the platforms like one machine with two hearts. 20 joint fleet ships formed the defensive ring around Planet 1. Earth cruisers held the inner patrol arc, their hulls angled toward the planet like shields. Cygnus destroyers took the outer edge, weapons cold, but tracking every unexplained movement beyond the orbital lane. Between them, carrier escorts deployed fighter patrols in rotating shifts, so no approach vector remained uncovered for more than a few seconds. The formation was not pretty, but it was tight, layered, and difficult to surprise. Around Planet 2, another 20 ships repeated the pattern with different colors and the same intention. The Dominion Spear coordinated the outer defense net, while Cygnus frigates seeded sensor buoys across the dark gaps between patrol lanes. No ship hovered alone. Every vessel had 2 backup firing angles, 3 emergency retreat paths, and at least one partner close enough to cover a shield failure. Ford called it paranoid. Vale called it civilized. On the Romulus, the bridge became less a command deck and more a living nerve center. Communications Officer Mira Alexian managed traffic between Earth Command, Cygnus Command, construction crews, platform captains, and defensive patrols until the channel map looked like a storm of disciplined light. Si Wang monitored every scan sweep for hidden movement beneath the noise of construction. Cherry Cortez ran weapons drills with the patrol ships, forcing each crew to practice target handoff, crossfire discipline, and emergency platform defense. Scion Smith kept the shield simulations running without pause. On his display, transparent layers formed around both planets, each one representing a future defensive shell that did not exist yet, but had to be planned as if it already did. He tested platform shield overlap, fleet shield reinforcement, civilian exclusion zones, and emergency blackout protocols. Every failed simulation turned red. Every red failure became another order sent to engineering. Below them, no mining crew touched the planet. No landing shuttle crossed the quarantine line. Instead, drones mapped access points, seismic anchors, underground power conduits, and the buried mining complex discovered beneath the ridge. Rhea kept the equipment asleep with a constant intrusion watch, her presence threaded through every probe and scanner like a hand resting lightly on a locked door. No unauthorized activation signals, Rhea reported. No hidden countdowns. No remote command pings. The mining systems remained dormant, obedient, and suspiciously well-maintained for equipment buried under a mountain. Ford glanced at the display. Only you could make sleeping mining equipment sound like it is plotting against us. Commander, Rhea replied, if something is buried, valuable, ancient, and still functional, it has earned the right to be treated as suspicious until it proves otherwise. Yuna approved the caution without looking away from the fleet map. Supply lanes were being assigned. Patrol rotations were being locked. Emergency medical ships were staged outside the main defense rings. Repair tenders took station behind the platforms, ready to patch armor, replace emitters, or drag damaged ships clear if the wrong enemy arrived before the defenses were finished. It was not enough yet. It was only the beginning. But beginnings mattered. Rexanne watched the preparations from the Void Reaper, her voice carrying over the command channel with grim approval. This is how empires should learn fear, she said, not from invasion, from watching 2 civilizations build a shield before anyone is foolish enough to test it. Yuna looked at the 2 planets, the platforms, the patrol rings, and the shared fleet markers glowing gold across the display. Everything was falling into place, but every completed piece only reminded her how much more had to be built. These defenses were for 2 worlds. The enemy beyond the galaxy would not stop at 2. The future would demand hundreds of shields, thousands of ships, and commanders brave enough to prepare for a war their grandchildren might have to finish. On the 7th day, The first Joint Task Force workers landed on both planets under the protection of combined Earth and Cygnus security teams. The landings were quiet, precise, and deliberately uncelebrated. No broadcast banners marked the moment. No public fleet channel announced the claim. Dropships descended through controlled corridors, touched down on pre-cleared ground, and immediately began unloading modular shelters, shield anchors, sensor posts, and the framework for the first permanent command buildings. Earth Marines and Cygnus security talents formed mixed defensive rings around every construction zone, while engineers moved with disciplined speed. On Planet 1, the first building rose beside a ridge of exposed reactor crystal, its walls unfolding from compact cargo frames into reinforced alloy panels. On Planet 2, Cygnus crews raised a matching structure near a mineral plain scarred with blue-gray ore veins. Both sites were small, almost humble, but Yuna knew better. The first building on a silent world was never just a building. It was a statement. The ambassadors arrived without ceremony. Earth's senior representative and the Cygnus ambassador landed separately, escorted by only enough guards to satisfy protocol and not enough to attract attention. Inside temporary command, shelters sealed against all outside transmission. They signed the quiet declarations that made both planets official joint holdings of Earth and Cygnus. The documents did not use the language of conquest. They used the language of protection, stewardship, and emergency strategic necessity. Everything was done as quietly as possible. The claim records were sealed under military law. The construction manifests were disguised as routine fleet defense supply transfers. Public traffic logs showed only patrol rotations and platform maintenance. To any curious empire watching from a distance, the two worlds looked like guarded survey sites, not the beginning of a resource shield that could strengthen Earth and Cygnus for generations. Yuna watched the encrypted feeds from the Romulus bridge and said nothing for a long time. She understood why secrecy was necessary. Other empires would not see protected resource worlds. They would see future shipyards, future weapons, future leverage. If the wrong eyes noticed too soon, the quiet work below would become the spark for conflicts. Earth and Cygnus were not yet ready to fight. So the task force built in silence. The ambassadors signed in silence. The security teams stood their posts in silence. And above both planets, the joint fleet held formation like a closed fist around two secrets the galaxy was not yet allowed to know. Chapter 12. 4 months later, production had truly begun on both planets. What had started as quiet landing zones and temporary command shelters had grown into fortified industrial settlements, with refineries, shield towers, worker habitats, and rail-fed processing yards spreading outward from the first construction sites. The populations on both worlds continued to rise as joint Earth-Cygnus workers, engineers, security teams, and support families arrived under sealed deployment orders. Security had grown with them. Additional orbital defense platforms now guarded both planets, their overlapping shield grids tied into patrol ships, ground batteries, and sensor relays hidden throughout the system. What had once required the constant overwatch of the DEATHCORE fleet and the Void Reaper could now stand on its own long enough to survive a surprise attack. After 4 months of watching, warning, and waiting, Yuna finally authorized the main DEATHCORE formation to return to regular patrol duty. The Romulus, the Void Reaper, and their attached ships no longer needed to hover over the two resource worlds like drawn weapons. The planets were still secret, still valuable, and still dangerous if the wrong empire learned the truth, but they were no longer helpless. The first major production run from Planet 1 changed the future of Allied defense. Its refineries and engineering labs produced the core components for 10-layer shield technology, a system designed for Earth, Cygnus, their main core worlds, and every colony important enough to protect before the dark rising reached the Milky Way. 1 shield layer could fail. 3 could fracture. 10 gave a planet time to survive, evacuate, counterattack, and keep its cities alive beneath the storm. Planet 2 answered with a different kind of progress. Its resource lines fed weapons laboratories, orbital foundries, and prototype yards dedicated to new shipborne weapon systems, reinforced hull designs, and relay orbital defense stations. The early results were crude, overbuilt, and ugly by peacetime standards, but Ford approved them anyway. Beautiful weapons were for parades. Survivable weapons were for wars. Together, the 2 planets became more than secret resource worlds. Planet 1 fed the shield plan. Planet 2 fed the fleet. Every shipment that left their sealed production zones moved under false civilian designations, hidden escort patterns, and classified routing codes. To the galaxy, nothing had changed. To Earth and Cygnus, the first pieces of the future war machine had finally begun to move. The departure order went out quietly, just like the arrival had months before. No ceremony marked the moment the DEATHCORE overwatch began to stand down. No public broadcast announced that the Romulus and the Void Reaper were leaving the 2 resource worlds behind. The only sign was the sudden shift in the fleet map as primary command authority transferred from Yuna's task force to the Permanent Joint Defense Command, now anchored between both planets. Yuna stood on the bridge of the Romulus and watched the transfer complete line by line. Orbital platforms reported full shield synchronization. Patrol cruisers confirmed rotating defense coverage. Ground batteries came online beneath false geological survey markers. Relay stations locked into the first permanent alert web, their signals passing from Planet 1 to Planet 2, and then outward through coded routes no civilian traffic chart would ever display. Joint Defense Command has the watch, Mira reported. Earth and Cygnus signatures are both embedded in the command chain. No single authority can move resources, ships, or platform fire control without dual confirmation. Ford gave the tactical display a long look. So we built 2 secret fortress worlds, handed them over to a joint command, and are now expected to leave like responsible adults. Rhea answered before Yuna could. Statistically, Commander, pretending to be responsible adults has improved regional stability by 12%. Only 12? Ford asked. You're still aboard, Rhea replied. A quiet chuckle moved across the bridge, but it faded quickly. Beyond the forward viewport, the 2 planets turned beneath their growing armor. Defense platforms glowed in slow orbital arcs. Shipyard frames glittered over Planet 2. Around Planet 1, shield test pulses rolled through the upper atmosphere in thin bands of blue-white light. 4 months ago, both worlds had been silent. Now they looked awake. Rexanne's image appeared beside the main display, her expression unreadable as the Void Reaper prepared to break Overwatch with them. Cygnus Patrol Command confirms relief coverage, she said. Our Talons are staying behind with the ground forces. They are not pleased to watch us leave. Neither are mine, Yuna said. That is usually how I know they understand the assignment. One by one, the attached Overwatch ships turned away from the planets and formed departure lanes. Escorts peeled off from high orbit. Carrier groups recovered their last patrol wings. Repair tenders made final supply transfers to the permanent stations before angling back toward the task force. Down on the surface, construction lights continued to burn, indifferent to the warships leaving above them. The work would not stop because the legends moved on. Yuna opened a system-wide command channel limited to military bands and sealed worker networks. To all personnel assigned to Planet 1 and Planet 2, she said, DEATHCORE Overwatch is transferring to regular patrol operations. Your defenses are active. Your command structure is established. Your work matters more than most of the galaxy will ever know. She let that settle before continuing. You are not miners guarding ore. You are builders preparing the shield that may one day hold the dark away from every world we love. Stay quiet. Stay disciplined. Stay worthy of the trust placed in you. Across both planets, no one cheered over the channel. Regulations did not allow it, and secrecy would not tolerate it. But in command shelters, refinery control rooms, platform decks, and half-built worker habitats, people stood a little straighter. Earth uniforms and Cygnus armor turned toward the same ceiling, listening to the fleet admiral's voice vanish into static as the ships above began to move. Romulus task force ready for departure, Si Wang reported. Void Reaper holding parallel vector. All attached ships aligned for patrol route return. Yuna took one last look at the two planets. They were safer now, but safety was not the same as peace. Their hidden factories would build shields, weapons, hulls, and stations. Their people would build homes under classified skies. And one day, if the dark rising reached the Milky Way, those quiet worlds might be the reason other worlds lived. "Take us out," Yuna commanded. The Romulus turned first, her ancient hull sliding away from the planets with the deliberate grace of a predator, leaving young behind to guard their own den. The Void Reaper matched her course, blackened red engines burning cold beside her. Behind them, the DEATHCORE formation followed, no longer an overwatch shield, but a patrol fleet returning to the wider dark. As the two resource worlds shrank on the tactical display, Yuna kept watching until their markers became small enough to look fragile again. Then Ria's voice softened through the bridge speakers. "They will hold, Yuna." Yuna did not answer immediately. At last, she stepped back from the viewport. "They have to," she said, "because we have too many other worlds still waiting for their shields." Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam pressed the comm control built into the armrest of her command chair. "Fleet Admiral Vorgon," she said, watching the Void Reaper drift toward its own patrol vector. "Are you taking a separate route?" Rexanne's image appeared beside the tactical display, her sharp features softened by the kind of amusement she rarely allowed in front of anyone else. "Yes, Sister Yuna," she replied. "Cygnus Patrol Command has requested the Void Reaper along the outer rim route. Apparently, my absence makes certain border captains nervous." "Godspeed, then," Yuna said. She held Rexanne's gaze for a moment, then let a smile break through the weight of command. "You know, I just thought of something. Ria and Destiny call themselves sisters with attitude." Rexanne's eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. "Yuna." Yuna's smile widened. "How about we become sisters with a terrible attitude?" For one long second, the command channel was silent. Then Rexanne threw her head back and laughed, a deep, dangerous sound that made more than one officer on the Romulus glance up from their station. "Accepted," Rexanne said at last, still smiling with too many teeth. "But if we are sisters with a terrible attitude, then the galaxy should be warned that our family gatherings may involve border patrols, classified weapons, and enemies making very poor life choices." Yuna leaned back in her chair, the smile lingering. "Then let us make sure they keep making those choices far away from our worlds." The channel closed, and Yuna let the smile remain for a few seconds longer than command required. Rexanne had always understood how to make war sound like an insult delivered with claws, and somehow that made the goodbye easier to bear. "Sister." The word settled in Yuna's chest with unexpected warmth. Not blood, not treaty, not politics. Something forged through grief, battles, and the kind of trust that survived silence. Still, when the Void Reaper angled away on its separate patrol route, the bridge suddenly felt larger around her. Yuna watched Rexanne's ship become a dark blade against the stars, and felt the old familiar ache of command return beneath the humor. Every departure was a kind of trust. Every admiral she sent into the dark carried a piece of the alliance with them, and all Yuna could do was believe the routes, crews, shields, and instincts they had built would be enough. Sisters with a terrible attitude, Yuna thought, the phrase almost making her smile again. Edison would have pretended not to approve. Then he would have told us to aim that attitude at someone useful. Her gaze drifted back to the shrinking markers of the two resource worlds. Behind them, hidden factories were already learning how to build the future. 10-layer shields, stronger hulls, relay stations, weapons ugly enough to matter. Ahead of them waited patrol routes, unknown threats, and the dark promise Edison's final warning had left inside her bones. Yuna knew they were stronger than they had been 4 months ago. That should have comforted her. Instead, it reminded her of a cruel truth. Strength did not end danger. Strength invited larger enemies to prove it could break. Yuna folded her hands over the armrests of her command chair and let the mask of command settle fully back into place. Rexanne would guard her route. Vale would judge every silence. Vara would plan for the worlds that could not save themselves. Ford would make impossible production sound merely unpleasant. Rhea and Destiny would complain, mock, protect, and remind everyone that family sometimes came with weapons systems and opinions. For the first time in days, Yuna allowed herself one private breath of gratitude. She was not carrying the future alone. But as the Romulus turned toward its patrol line, she also knew gratitude was not permission to rest. The dark rising was still coming. The galaxy was still sleeping. And somewhere out beyond every shield they had built, something vast was moving closer. Suddenly, Yuna lifted one hand and pointed toward the holographic display as the patrol route locked into place. "Prepare for FTL jump," she commanded. Then, with a perfectly serious expression and one dramatic finger still aimed at the stars, she added, "Make it so." The entire Romulus bridge fell into a silence so complete that even Rhea and Destiny seemed to pause out of respect for the absurdity of what had just happened. Cherry Cortis froze at weapons. Si Wang stopped mid-command. Mira looked down at her console as if the communications board had suddenly become the safest place in the galaxy. Cherry Corta's hand hovered above the weapons console, her mouth slightly open, as if she had just seen a torpedo launch itself and ask for applause. Cyan Smith at the shield station blinked twice, then checked his own display as if dramatic command gestures might somehow affect shield harmonics. Ensign Se Young Peterson looked from Yuna to Ford and back again, clearly trying to decide whether this was an ancient command tradition or a test of junior officer composure. Mira Alexian's shoulders shook once before she strangled the laugh into a professional cough and pretended to adjust the comm bandwidth. "Fleet channel is still closed," she reported, far too quickly. Thankfully. That almost broke the bridge. A few officers turned sharply back to their stations, fighting smiles with the desperate discipline of people who knew laughing at a fleet admiral was technically unhealthy. Even the helmsman sat a little straighter, eyes fixed on the FTL lane, as if the stars themselves might report him. Rhea finally broke her own silence with deliberate precision. "For archive purposes, I require clarification. Was that a formal command, a morale experiment, or an attempt to intimidate the holographic display?" Commander Jerry Ford was the first to break. He burst out laughing, one hand gripping the tactical rail, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "You have been watching old archive entertainment, haven't you?" he said. Yuna did not lower her finger. "Commander, I have no idea what you are talking about." Rhea's voice slid through the speakers with merciless calm. "That statement is false. Fleet Admiral Adam accessed 3 hours and 17 minutes of 20th Century Starship Command drama last night. Destiny chimed in brightly. She also replayed the dramatic pointing scenes twice. Ford laughed harder. Yuna finally lowered her hand, her face still mostly composed, except for the small, guilty smile at the corner of her mouth. "Fine," she said. "Old archive entertainment may have wisdom we have neglected." Si Wang looked toward the FTL display, deadpan. "For the record, Fleet Admiral, the jump engines respond to standard commands. Dramatic finger movement is optional." "Noted," Yuna said. Then she leaned back in her command chair, the smile fading into command again. Jump. Chapter 13. As the Romulus glided through FTL, Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam gave the order. "Our first stop will be Earth before we all head back to Epsilon." Commander Ford looked toward her. "So you're going to talk with Ambassador Tovan?" he asked. "Yes," Yuna replied. "He needs to know what's coming from the Black Beyond," Fleet Admiral Adam said very quietly, so only Ford could hear. "After that, I need to meet up with someone you know." Ford instantly knew who Yuna was talking about, but he kept quiet about it. Down in Docking Bay 12, Sector 7, recruit Lorne, call sign Mechanical Lover, was elbow-deep in grime, scrubbing dirt from the deck plating, while Destiny and Rhea provided what they insisted was supervision, and what everyone else would have called psychological warfare with speakers. "Elbows deep, lover boy," Destiny said sweetly. "Put some feeling into it. I've had diagnostic wipes show more passion." Rhea's voice followed with a wicked lilt. "Scrub harder, cadet. If you are going to flirt with a dreadnought, the least you can do is give the floor a meaningful relationship." Destiny hummed with approval. "Careful, Rhea. At this pace, the dirt may fall in love first." Major Merrick heard every word. He shook his head in mock sympathy, watching Lorne scrub like a man discovering that bad life choices had excellent upper body benefits. "Look at it this way, kid," Merrick called, his voice carrying just enough sympathy to be insulting. "Most pilots spend years trying to impress a ship. You managed it in one sentence, and all it cost you was your dignity, your afternoon, and possibly the top layer of your fingerprints." Lorne paused with the scrub brush in his hand and stared at the deck like it had personally betrayed him. "Respectfully, Major," he said, voice strained with the dignity of a man one joke away from crawling into a maintenance vent. "I would like to report that my dignity left the bay 10 minutes ago and has refused all attempts at recovery." Destiny made a delighted sound through the speakers. "Confirmed. Dignity signal lost." Rhea added, "Recommend search pattern. Never." Lorne lifted the scrub brush like a wounded banner. "That's fine," he said. "If my dignity is missing in action, then I'm promoting stubbornness to acting commander until further notice." He bent back to the deck and started scrubbing harder. "Permission to inform the dirt it is now facing a command-level grudge?" Destiny gave an impressed little chime. "Careful, Rhea. He's developing a personality. That usually voids the rookie warranty." Rhea answered with mock concern. "Noted. Promoting dirt to hostile command presence. Cadet Mechanical Lover is authorized to engage with excessive scrubbing." On the command bridge, the Romulus moved through FTL with the deep, steady hum of ancient engines, while blue-white light from the stretched stars rippled across every console like water over steel. The crew worked in disciplined silence, but the air carried a quiet tension beneath the routine reports. Everyone knew Earth was ahead of them. Epsilon waited beyond that, and somewhere in the black, beyond something vast enough to frighten legends, was still moving closer. Mira glanced up from her navigation console as the main display refreshed. 3 days until we reach Earth's approach vector, Fleet Admiral." Yuna gave a single nod. Acknowledged. She turned slightly toward Mira. In one day, hit the comms and contact orbital docking control. Tell them our arrival window and have them set a docking schedule before we reach Earth. Mira nodded, her hands already moving over the console. Aye, Fleet Admiral. Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam stood from her command chair. Commander Ford, you have the bridge. I'll be in my office. 5 minutes later, Yuna reached her office. The door hissed open, and she stepped inside, settling into her chair before pulling herself toward the desk. On its surface rested an old photograph of her second crew. Yuna Adam, James Oxford, Alexa Bezel, and Shui Luan. Those were memories from 50 years ago, yet the faces in the image still felt close enough to speak. Yuna rested her fingers near the edge of the frame, careful not to touch the glass at first, as if doing so might disturb the past sealed beneath it. Luna's smile carried the confidence of a younger officer who had not yet learned how command could hollow a person out. James Oxford stood beside her, with the stubborn pride of a man who had always believed the next impossible mission could still be survived. Alexa Bezel's eyes held the sharp focus Yuna remembered from countless tactical briefings, while Shui Luan looked calm, almost serene, as if war had never quite managed to steal the quiet strength inside her. For a moment, Yuna was not a fleet admiral standing on the edge of another dark future. She was back with them, hearing their voices in the corridors, their arguments over strategy, their laughter during the rare hours when the universe had allowed them to breathe. 50 years had taken so much from that photograph. It had scattered lives, ended names, changed ships, and turned moments into history. But it had not taken the ache. Yuna finally touched the frame, her cybernetic fingers resting against the cold glass, while the living part of her remembered what loss still felt like. I have carried you all this far, she whispered to the silent faces. And I am so tired of carrying ghosts. One day later, Destiny's voice sounded softly through Yuna's office speakers. One day to ETA at Earth. Yuna lifted her eyes from the old photograph and drew a slow breath. Thank you, Destiny. She hesitated, then added, Rhea, I need a word with you in total privacy. The room answered with a faint shift in the lights, as every external channel sealed itself away. Yes, ma'am, Rhea replied, her voice quieter than usual. Yuna leaned back in her chair, studying the reflection of the stars across the dark surface of her desk. How did you take out that planet-killer weapon so quickly? She asked. I gave you authorization. But I didn't expect you to have the Super Lancer ready before anyone on the bridge could even react. For several seconds, Rhea did not answer. When she finally spoke, the dry humor was gone. Because I had already prepared for the possibility that you would need it, she said. Yuna's expression sharpened. Explain. Rhea's voice softened, almost cautious. When you asked me to wake the weapon, I did more than route power. I began quiet corridor sweeps, safety calculations, field stabilization checks, and target acquisition modeling under maintenance cover. I did not arm the weapon fully. I would not cross that line without your authorization. But I prepared every harmless step around it so that, if the moment came, only the final command chain remained. Yuna stared at the desk, her cybernetic fingers resting near the old photograph. You anticipated me. I anticipated your fear, Rhea corrected gently. And I anticipated the kind of enemy that could make you afraid enough to ask me for a promise not to hate you. The words settled into the office like weight. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. So, when Carveth identified himself, the targeting solution was already waiting, Rhea said. The firing corridor was clean. Destiny verified no civilian craft, colony, station, allied vessel, moon, planet, or protected object was in the path. When Carveth confirmed that he was the assassin responsible for Edison and Vorgon's deaths, I made a decision in less than a second. Her voice grew quieter. Not because the weapon was easy to fire, because the choice had already been forming inside me from the moment you asked me to wake it. Yuna opened her eyes. You still should have asked. Yes, Rhea said at once. I know. There was no defense in her voice now, only acceptance. I was fast because I had prepared. I was wrong because I did not let you choose the final moment. Both things are true. Yuna looked back at the photograph of her old crew, then at the reflection of the stars beyond her office viewport. I needed to hear you say that. And I needed to say it, Rhea replied. I am learning what it means to be crew, Yuna. Not just weapon, not just ship, not just shield. Crew. That means I cannot protect you by taking choices away from you, even when I believe I am sparing you pain. Yuna's voice softened. Good. Because next time, you warn me before you become efficient justice. A faint trace of Rhea's old humor returned. Acknowledged. Next time, I will request permission before delivering emotionally satisfying strategic overkill. Despite herself, Yuna smiled. That is still not comforting. I am an ancient dreadnought with a newly assigned personal name, Rhea said. Comforting may take practice. Yuna let the faint smile linger for only a moment before it faded into something quieter. The office was still sealed, the stars outside moving in long, silent lines as the Romulus carried them toward Earth. On the desk, the old photograph watched her with the faces of people she had never stopped missing. Rhea, she said at last, I am angry that you took the choice from me. The lights dimmed by the smallest fraction. I know, Rhea answered. Yuna's fingers rested on the edge of the photograph frame. But I also know why you did it. You were trying to protect me from becoming something I would have hated myself for wanting. She drew a slow breath, and when she spoke again, the command in her voice softened into exhaustion, grief, and truth. I cannot pretend that does not matter. Rhea stayed silent, as if she did not trust herself to interrupt. Yuna looked toward the ceiling speakers, though she knew Rhea was everywhere around her. So I forgive you, she said, not because what you did was right, not because you are allowed to decide my burdens for me. I forgive you because you admitted the truth, because you understand the line you crossed, and because family does not throw someone away the first time they make a terrible choice for love. For several seconds, Rhea did not answer. When she finally did, her voice was lower than usual. I don't know what to say. Yuna's mouth softened. Then say you will do better. I will do better, Rhea said at once. I will ask. I will warn you. I will not mistake protection for permission again. Yuna closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight in her chest ease by a fraction. Good. She touched the photograph once more, then let her hand fall to the desk. Because I need you with me, Rhea, not behind me making decisions in the dark. Beside me, where crew belongs. The office lights warmed slightly, almost like the ship was breathing out. Beside you, Rhea repeated. Understood. Yuna opened her eyes and allowed the smallest smile to return. And for the record, efficient justice still requires paperwork. Rhea's humor came back carefully, like someone stepping onto repaired ground. Then I will prepare a full report titled, Ancient Dreadnought Makes Emotionally Complicated Decision. Fleet Admiral Issues Conditional Forgiveness. Yuna shook her head, but the smile stayed. Shorten the title. Yes, ma'am, Rhea said. Forgiven, but watched. Yuna laughed softly, the sound quiet but real in the sealed office. That one I can accept. Chapter 14. The Romulus emerged near Earth's orbital station with 3 hours remaining before final approach. The blue-white curve of Earth filled the forward viewport, vast and familiar beneath bands of cloud. while the orbital station glittered above it like a city of steel anchored against the stars. Traffic lanes shimmered around the planet in ordered arcs, as transports, patrol craft, maintenance barges, and diplomatic shuttles moved under the strict guidance of docking control. For once, the ancient dreadnought did not push forward. She waited outside the assigned holding perimeter, engines cooled to station approach levels, weapons fully asleep, and every external transponder broadcasting peaceful arrival codes. On the bridge, Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam watched Earth turn slowly below them and felt the weight of home press against the silence. They were close enough to see the world they had sworn to protect, but not yet close enough to dock. Until orbital control gave them a berth, the Romulus could only hold position, a warship with too many secrets, waiting patiently at the edge of Earth's door. 15 minutes to docking with Earth's orbital station, Mira announced from communications. The Romulus held steady in the final approach lane, her engines reduced to docking thrust, while the station's guidance beacons painted clean blue paths across the forward display. Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam rose from her command chair and opened the shipwide channel. "All hands, this is Fleet Admiral Adam. Once we dock, the ship will enter a 24-hour stand-down order." She paused just long enough for every deck to hear the impossible shape of those words. "I have a long meeting with Ambassador Tovan Rel, and none of you are useful to me, exhausted, cranky, or living on emergency rations and station coffee. So once docking control clears us, enjoy your time. Eat real food, call your families, visit the station, buy whatever you forgot to pack, and remember how to be people for one full day." Down in Docking Bay 12, the entire bay froze. Mechanics stopped mid-repair. Pilots stopped arguing over landing rotation. Ground troops stared at the nearest speaker like it had just declared war on discipline. For several seconds, no one believed what they had heard. Then comprehension hit all at once. The docking bay detonated into cheers. Boots hammered the deck. Toolboxes rattled. Someone shouted, "24 hours!" And another voice answered, "Fleet Admiral Adam just declared a holiday." Major Merrick tried to restore order, failed immediately, and settled for yelling, "If anyone breaks station property before we even dock, I will personally revoke your joy." That only made them louder. On the command bridge, however, the reaction was the exact opposite. Every officer went still. Cherry Cortez slowly turned from weapons. Si Wong stopped with one hand above his console. Mira looked from the open channel back to Yuna, as if checking whether she had accidentally transmitted a classified miracle. Commander Ford finally leaned toward the tactical rail and said very carefully, "Fleet Admiral, did you just authorize 24 hours of liberty for this crew?" Yuna closed the channel and looked at him with perfect calm. "Yes, Commander." Ford glanced toward the bridge doors, beyond which the sound of distant celebration had already begun to travel through the ship. "You understand Docking Bay 12 is going to treat that as a sacred religious event." Yuna's mouth curved faintly. "Then let them worship sandwiches, sleep, and poor financial decisions for one day. After what we have seen, they have earned it." Ria's voice slipped through the bridge speakers, thoughtful and dry. "I am already detecting elevated morale, suspicious travel plans, and 3 separate crew members searching station directories for dessert vendors," Destiny added brightly. "Correction? 4. Commander Ford has opened the bakery map." Ford straightened. "That was tactical reconnaissance." Yuna looked toward him. "Bring me coffee, and I will endorse the mission." The bridge finally broke, laughter moving through the stunned silence, and outside the viewport, Earth's orbital station waited, with its docking arms extended like a safe harbor. Yuna stepped onto Earth Station with the others as the docking corridor opened into the crowded civilian concourse. Around her, crew members from the Romulus slowed in stunned delight at the sight of food stalls, supply shops, rest lounges, and actual open space that did not smell faintly of engine coolant. She turned back toward them before they could scatter completely. "Enjoy your stay, people," she said. her voice carrying easily over the noise of the station. "And do not waste it." A few officers straightened out of habit. Yuna let her gaze sweep across the group, then added, "Because 24 hours is still a very short time." The reminder was enough. Discipline held for exactly 3 more seconds before the crew broke into motion, spreading through the concourse with the urgent purpose of people determined to use every minute of freedom before duty found them again. Ford watched 2 junior officers nearly collide while arguing over station noodles, and only shook his head. 24 hours, he muttered. They are going to spend 6 of them deciding what to eat first. Yuna allowed herself one faint smile, then turned away from the crowd. Her own liberty would not include rest, food, or anything resembling celebration. Beyond the station windows, Earth waited below in blue and white silence, and beneath that atmosphere was the one person who needed to hear the truth before anyone else outside the command circle did. She crossed to another secured waiting area reserved for command flights down to the planet. The shuttle assigned to her was smaller than a dropship, but faster through controlled descent lanes, built for officials who needed to move between orbital command and Earth without attracting too much attention. Once clearance came through, Yuna boarded alone and watched the station fall behind as the shuttle dipped toward the atmosphere. The flight took 2 hours. Clouds rolled past the viewport in bright layers before giving way to the mountains, training grounds, and guarded compounds of Earth Command's diplomatic and military academy complex. Junior ambassadors studied there beside officer candidates and future recruits, learning in adjoining halls that words and weapons both shaped the survival of worlds. Ambassador Tovan Rel's dormitory suite sat inside the Academy's secured residential wing, half private room and half working office. Shelves of diplomatic records lined one wall, while training schedules for junior ambassadors and military cadets glowed across a side display. Tovan looked up from his desk as Yuna entered, all 4 eyes sharpening at once when he saw her expression. "Ambassador," Yuna said, letting the door seal behind her. "I have bad news, and other bad news. For your ears only, for now." Tovan rose slowly. The formality in his posture remained, but the son who knew her better than most leaders ever would heard what command was hiding beneath her voice. "Show me," he said. Yuna placed a sealed data crystal on his desk and activated the projection. The room darkened as the dark, rising footage unfolded between them. The same digital scan the 7-star admiral had shown her earlier, taken from the original Dark Fleet long-range sweep. Across the image, planet-sized living masses moved through the black beyond the Milky Way, surrounded by swarms of smaller starfighter-sized creatures spilling from their bodies like weapons being born. Tovan said nothing at first, his mandibles stilled, his 4 hands lowered to the edge of the desk as the footage continued to play, each frame making the silence heavier. At last, he looked from the projection to Yuna. "How long?" Yuna's answer was quiet, but it landed harder than an alarm. 80 years. Or less. For a moment, Tovan did not seem to understand the words. 80 years was long enough for governments to change, for children to grow old, for memorials to gather dust. It was also far too short for a galaxy to prepare for monsters the size of worlds. His 4 eyes remained fixed on Yuna, but the projection painted the truth across his face before he could hide it. 80 years, he repeated, his voice low and hollow. One of his lower hands tightened against the desk until the edge creaked beneath his grip. "Yuna, that is not a warning. That is a sentence." Yuna did not soften it for him. She had come here because Tovan deserved the truth, not a gentler lie. "It is a countdown," she said, "and we have already lost the luxury of pretending it belongs to another generation." Tovan turned back to the footage. The planet-sized masses rolled through the black in terrible silence, while their smaller offspring swarmed ahead of them. He had spoken before hostile courts, negotiated with empires that measured honor and threats, and survived being a young ambassador under the shadow of war. None of that prepared him for the sight of an enemy so vast that diplomacy itself seemed suddenly small. Then his posture changed. Fear did not leave him, but it found discipline. His upper hands folded behind his back, his lower hands relaxed from the desk, and Ambassador Tovan Rel returned to the room, one breath at a time. "Who knows?" he asked. "For now, only the command circle," Yuna said. "Ford, Rexan, Vale, Vara, Rhea, Destiny, and the officers I need to begin military preparation. No civilian council, no public announcement, no academy staff." Tovan's eyes narrowed. "And yet you came to me." "Because you are not just a civilian council," Yuna replied. "You are Earth's ambassador, the voice that will have to keep frightened governments from tearing each other apart once this truth reaches them. If we prepare only the fleets and forget the people, the Dark Rising will not need to fire a shot before panic starts killing worlds for it." Tovan looked down at the sealed data crystal, then back at Yuna. The fear in him had not vanished. It had become purpose. "Then I will begin quietly," he said. "Not with speeches, not with alarms, with policy, alliances, academy doctrine, emergency diplomacy, and every future ambassador I can train to hear terror without spreading it." His mandibles shifted once, the closest he came to a grim smile. "If darkness is coming for the Milky Way, Mother, then we will make sure it does not find us divided." Yuna studied him for another moment, then let the heavier subject rest. "Another thing," she said, her tone shifting just enough to make the room feel less like a sealed war council. "How did your mission go?" Tovan's mandibles shifted in a way Yuna had learned to recognize as deeply restrained irritation. "It went well enough," he answered. "The Kronos Empire is greedy, pompous, and possibly a freak of nature in political form. But for all that, they are functional, difficult, arrogant, exhausting, and useful." Yuna's eyebrow lifted. "That is your diplomatic assessment?" "That is the polite version," Tovan said. "The classified version requires more adjectives and a stronger chair." Yuna let the humor settle between them for a moment, before her expression turned serious again. "I may need to ask you to do something I truly do not want to ask you to do," she said. "Nothing too reckless, just something with a little danger sprinkled on top." Tovan gave her a flat look. "That is not as reassuring as you think it is." "Find us at least 2 more empires willing to join the alliance," Yuna said. "Only if they are truly willing. No intimidation, no desperate bargains, and no treaties built on fear. We need allies, not hostages, wearing diplomatic signatures." Tovan's mandibles shifted, the dry humor fading into calculation. "And if one of these empires seems unstable?" "Then you back off," Yuna said at once. "If anything feels off, politics, military behavior, sudden generosity, too many smiles in the wrong room, you walk away and find another. I would rather lose a possible alliance than hand our secrets to an empire that is already rotting from the inside." Tovan gave a slow nod. 2 more empires, willing, stable, and not quietly sharpening knives under the treaty table. "Exactly," Yuna said. Then, as if remembering another piece of news that could not be left unsaid, she added, "By the way, we found the assassin who pulsed the late Fleet Admiral Edison and Fleet Admiral Vorgon." Tovan went completely still. "You found him?" "We did," Yuna said. "Karveth Sar, last blade of the Slither King command caste. He survived 50 years and thought announcing his name to Rexan and me was a wise career decision." Tovan's 4 eyes hardened. Was he captured? Yuna gave him a look that was half grief, half exhausted irony. No. The Romulus stole our thunder before we could get that far. Romulus? Tovan asked. Yuna's expression softened despite herself. Not Romulus anymore. She has a name now. Her name is Rhea. For a moment after saying the name, Yuna looked almost embarrassed by the softness it drew out of her. She had commanded dreadnoughts, buried enemies, and faced threats large enough to frighten galaxies. Yet speaking Rhea's name made her voice gentler than any enemy had ever heard it. The old ship had been steel, engines, weapons, and attitude for most of Yuna's life. Now, somehow, she had become someone Yuna could introduce with pride. Tovan noticed the change at once. He had seen Yuna speak of ships as assets, weapons, burdens, and responsibilities. He had rarely seen her speak of one as family. The faint warmth in her eyes said more than the explanation itself. Rhea had not simply taken a name. She had crossed some invisible line in Yuna's heart, moving from ancient warship to daughter of the fleet, from tool of command to soul under Yuna's protection. She chose it herself, Yuna said quietly. I asked if she wanted a name that belonged to her, not just the hole she lived in. I expected a joke. Maybe something dramatic enough to make. Ford threatened retirement again. A small smile touched her mouth. Instead, she chose Rhea, a name tied to mothers, origins, and survival. I was not ready for that. Yuna looked down at the sealed data crystal on Tovan's desk, and the pride in her expression mingled with something more fragile. For 50 years, I thought I was commanding a ship that remembered us. Now, I think she has been growing with us the entire time, learning grief, humor, loyalty, and restraint from every person who walked her decks. When she said she wanted to be called Rhea, it felt like realizing someone had been standing beside me for decades, waiting for me to finally see her clearly. Her voice lowered. So yes, Ambassador. Rhea stole our thunder. She also saved Rexanne and me from carrying one more piece of vengeance in our own hands. I am still angry with her for how she did it. But I am proud of her, too. Yuna lifted her eyes back to Tovan. And that is a very complicated thing to be when your warship has become family. Tovan did not answer immediately. For once, the ambassador who could untangle hostile treaties and make rival governments sit at the same table seemed content to let silence do the first work. His 4 eyes stayed on Yuna, not with judgment, but with the careful tenderness of someone witnessing a truth she had not meant to reveal so plainly. At last, his mandibles shifted softly. You speak of her the way you spoke of me when I was young, he said. As if she is infuriating, dangerous, brilliant, and somehow already under your protection before you decided whether that was reasonable. Yuna's expression tightened, but not in anger. Tovan saw the flinch and softened his voice. That is not criticism, Mother. It is recognition. He looked toward the darkened projection, though the scan had faded and only the sealed data crystal remained between them. Rhea chose a name tied to mothers and survival, he continued. Perhaps that surprised you, because she learned those ideas from the people around her, from Edison, from Ford, from every frightened crew member who trusted her hull, and from you. Tovan's gaze returned to Yuna, steady and warm. You keep collecting impossible children, he said, a trace of humor entering his voice. A Vexarian survivor who became Earth's ambassador, an ancient dreadnought who became Rhea, a fleet full of officers who pretend they are not family until someone threatens them. Yuna let out a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. That makes me sound irresponsible. No, Tovan said. It makes you dangerous in the best possible way. You look at weapons, survivors, and broken things, and somehow you decide they are worth protecting until they remember how to be more than what hurt them. He rested one lower hand lightly on the edge of his desk, near the data crystal. If Rhea is family to you, then she is family to me as well. I will not pretend I fully understand what it means for a warship to choose personhood, but I understand what it means to be seen by you before the rest of the galaxy knows what it is looking at. Then Tovan's expression grew more solemn. Be proud of her, he said. Be angry when she crosses lines. Teach her what those lines mean. That is what you did for me. That is what mothers do, even when their children are made of metal, code, grief, and very questionable judgment. Yuna let the moment rest between them, then drew herself back into motion with a small, tired smile. All right, kiddo, she said. I have to go check up on your Aunt Luna before I return to Planet Epsilon. After that, it is more training, more duty, and more border patrol. She paused at the door, then lifted one finger, as if remembering something important. I almost forgot. The 2 resource planets are in heavy production now. Same goes for EC Prime. The shield plan, the weapons upgrades, the relay stations, all of it is finally moving. Tovan's expression softened at the mention of Luna, then grew thoughtful at the production update. He understood what those worlds meant now. They were not simply mines or factories. They were the beginning of the shield his mother intended to build between the Milky Way and the dark. Before Yuna left, she crossed back to him instead of offering a salute. Tovan straightened, already understanding the old gesture before she reached him. Yuna leaned forward and touched her forehead softly to his. It was not ceremony, not rank, and not politics. It was respect, trust, and family carried in a silence too deep for words. Tovan closed his 4 eyes for one brief second and returned the gesture with the same care. When they parted, he bowed his head to her, not as Earth's ambassador to DEATHCORE's fleet admiral, but as a son acknowledging the woman who had become his mother in every way that mattered. Stay alive, Yuna said quietly. Tovan's mandibles shifted with the faintest trace of humor. You first, mother. Yuna snapped back before he could enjoy the last word. A 71-year-old child telling me goodbye is something else, she said. For a heartbeat, Tovan only stared at her. Then the absurdity of it finally broke through the weight of the room, and they both laughed, quietly at first, then with the kind of tired warmth that came only after surviving too many serious conversations in one day. Tovan recovered first and returned the snap with a dignified tilt of his head. And a 93-year-old woman adopting every lost person who crosses her path is perfectly normal? Yuna's smile widened despite herself. Watch it, kiddo. Yes, mother, Tovan said, still laughing. Chapter 15. By then, Yuna had already left Tovan's dormitory and made her way across Earth Command's civilian district toward Yuna Adam's home. It was meant to be her final visit before returning to Planet Epsilon, and the thought made the short drive feel heavier than she wanted to admit. When she reached Luna's front driveway, another vehicle arrived at almost the same time. Sherry Richardson stepped out, her face brightening the moment she saw Yuna. Sherry was Yuna Adam's daughter, and to her, Yuna had always been more than a fleet admiral. Hey there, Aunt Yuna, Sherry said warmly. How are you doing? Yuna's mouth curved at once, the old family humor rising before the emotion could get too serious. I'm doing fine, she said. So how is the 79-year-old lady doing these days? Sherry laughed before she could stop herself, the sound bright enough to chase some of the heaviness from Yuna's chest. You know, Aunt Yuna, most people greet family with hello before they start age-based combat, she said, closing her vehicle door and walking toward her. But if you are asking about Mom, she is doing fine. Stubborn, dramatic when bored, and still pretending she does not enjoy being checked on. Yuna gave a quiet snort. That sounds like Luna. Sherry's smile softened as she reached Yuna and pulled her into a quick, familiar hug. She will be happy to see you, she said. Then her eyes narrowed playfully. Though if you call her the 79-year-old lady to her face, I am not responsible for what she throws at you. Yuna hugged her back and smiled over Sherry's shoulder. Good. Then she still has her aim. Inside the house, Yuna Adam was exactly where Sherry had predicted she would be, sitting in her favorite chair near the front window, pretending she had not been watching the driveway for the last 10 minutes. Age had silvered more of her hair and slowed the way she rose to her feet, but it had not softened the sharpness in her eyes. The moment Yuna stepped through the door, Luna's expression shifted through relief, irritation, affection, and accusation so quickly that only family could have translated it. So, Luna said, folding her arms with the dignity of a retired commander who still believed everyone in the room reported to her, the great fleet admiral finally remembers where my house is. Yuna stopped just inside the doorway and gave her the kind of look they had been trading for more than half a century. I was told a 79-year-old lady lived here and might still be dangerous. Luna's eyes narrowed, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Sherry, she called without looking away from Yuna. Did you warn her about throwing range? I did, Sherry said, already smiling as she followed Yuna inside. She said it meant your aim was still good. For one breath, Luna tried to hold the glare. Then she laughed, small at first and rough around the edges, before it opened into something warmer. The sound changed the room. The years, the wars, and the looming return to duty did not disappear, but they stepped back enough to let the old bond breathe. Luna's mood was bright in the way of someone refusing to let worry win. She teased because concern sat too close to the surface. She complained because she was relieved. She fussed at Yuna's uniform, asked whether she had eaten, and accused DEATHCORE of trying to work her into the floor. Yet every sharp word carried affection beneath it, and every glance lingered a little too long, as if Luna were measuring how much weight her older sister had brought home this time. When Yuna finally crossed the room, Luna did not wait for rank, greeting, or explanation. She pulled her into a firm embrace with surprising strength, one hand gripping the back of Yuna's jacket, like she was making sure the fleet admiral was real and not another memory arriving late. You look tired, Luna murmured. Yuna closed her eyes for 1 second too long. So do you. I earned mine properly, Luna said, pulling back just enough to look at her. You keep collecting yours from classified disasters. The joke made Sherry laugh, but Luna's eyes stayed on Yuna. Beneath the humor, she was worried, not frightened exactly. Yuna Adam had lived too long around DEATHCORE to waste fear on every shadow, but watchful, protective, and quietly unsettled by the way Yuna carried herself. It was the mood of a woman happy to have her family in the room, and wise enough to know that family rarely came home in full uniform unless something heavy was waiting outside the door. Luna guided Yuna toward the sitting room, as if rank had never existed between them. Sit, she ordered, before you start pretending that standing makes bad news lighter. Yuna sat because arguing with Luna inside Luna's own house was a battle she had lost decades ago. Sherry slipped toward the kitchen, giving them privacy without needing to be asked, though both sisters knew she would remain close enough to hear if either of them called. Luna lowered herself into the chair across from Yuna and studied her with the same sharp patience she had once used on bridge reports. Do not give me the public version, she said. I spent too many years in DEATHCORE to be impressed by classified silence. Something followed you into this house. Yuna looked toward the window, where the late afternoon light rested across Luna's garden. I cannot tell you everything, she said. That answer means it is worse than I thought, Luna replied. A faint smile touched Yuna's mouth. You always were annoying that way. Observant, Luna corrected. Annoying is what people call it, when they are hiding something badly. Her expression softened before Yuna could answer. Is it another war? Yuna's silence answered enough. Luna's hands tightened slightly in her lap, but she did not ask the question again. Not today, Yuna said at last. Maybe not for years. But something is coming, Luna. Something larger than the old wars, and I need time to prepare people who do not even know they need saving yet. Luna leaned back slowly, the humor leaving her face but not the strength. Then that is why you came here before going back to Epsilon. Yuna nodded. I wanted one normal visit before everything becomes schedules, patrols, production requests, and sealed briefings again. Normal? Luna asked, lifting one eyebrow. Yuna, you arrived in uniform, looking like you had personally threatened 3 governments before breakfast, and opened by insulting my age. Yuna's smile finally reached her eyes. That is normal for us. Luna tried to hold her stern expression and failed. The 2 sisters laughed softly, not because anything was truly funny, but because laughter had always been the bridge they built over things too heavy to name. When the laughter faded, Luna reached across the space between them and took Yuna's hand. Her grip was older now, but still steady. Promise me something, she said. Do not turn yourself into the shield so completely that you forget you are allowed to come home. Yuna looked down at their hands. The cybernetic fingers rested against Luna's aging ones, metal and flesh joined by more years than either of them liked to count. I will try, she said. Luna's eyes narrowed. That is a commander's answer. I asked for a sister's promise. Yuna let out a slow breath, then squeezed Luna's hand carefully. I promise I will come home when I can. And when I cannot, I will remember that I still have a home to return to. Luna nodded once, satisfied enough to stop pressing and stubborn enough to remember every word. Good. Because if you make me chase you across half the fleet at 79, I am bringing Sherry, and she will be worse than I am. From the kitchen, Sherry called. I heard that, and she's right. Yuna looked toward the kitchen doorway, then back to Luna. You raised her too well. I raised her to survive you, Luna said. Completely different skill set. For Yuna, the visit felt like stepping into a room where time had not forgiven anything, but had at least learned to sit quietly. Luna's house smelled of old wood, warm tea, and the kind of ordinary life Yuna had spent decades protecting from a distance. That ordinariness hurt more than she expected. On the Romulus, every corridor answered to command. In Luna's home, the walls held birthdays, arguments, family meals, and years Yuna had missed because duty always found a way to call first. She felt relieved to be there, and guilty for that relief. Part of her wanted to sink into Luna's chair, let Sherry bring tea from the kitchen, and pretend for 1 hour that the universe was not changing shape beyond the edge of the galaxy. Another part of her counted the minutes until she had to leave, measured every laugh against the training schedules waiting on planet Epsilon, and heard Edison's warning beneath every quiet pause. Luna saw more than Yuna wanted her to see. That was the dangerous thing about sisters. Admirals could hide fear from councils, fleets, and enemies. They could bury grief beneath orders and turn exhaustion into strategy. But Luna had known Yuna before the legends hardened around her name, before DEATHCORE turned her into the woman other empires feared. Sitting across from Luna, Yuna felt some of that armor loosen, and the loss of it frightened her almost as much as the dark rising. Still, when Luna took her hand, something inside Yuna steadied. The promise did not make the coming years lighter. It did not erase the 80-year countdown, The secret production lines, the fragile alliances, or the knowledge that entire worlds might one day depend on choices she made in sealed rooms. But it reminded her that she was not only a shield, not only a fleet admiral, and not only the person everyone expected to stand between civilization and the dark. She was also a sister sitting in a familiar house, holding an aging hand that still refused to tremble in front of her. She was an aunt to Sherry, a mother in Tovan's heart, a reluctant guardian to Rhea, and a woman who had spent so long carrying ghosts that she had almost forgotten the living were still reaching back. The realization made her chest ache, but not in the usual way. This ache was warmer. It had room inside it for grief, gratitude, fear, and the fragile comfort of being loved without needing to prove she deserved it. Yuna's fingers tightened gently around Luna's hand. For all the wars she had survived and all the commands she had given, the next words nearly broke on the way out. "Baby sister," she said, her voice fragile in a way Luna had not heard in years. "This visit could be my very last." She forced herself to keep looking at Luna, even though every instinct told her to hide behind rank, duty, or one more joke. "But I will do everything I can to come home to you. I swear that." Her breath caught, and the fear beneath the promise finally showed. "I am just afraid that if I come home too late, you might not be here to greet me anymore." Luna's face softened in a way that made her look both older and stronger at once. She did not rush to answer. Instead, she tightened her grip around Yuna's hand and held on as if the promise could pass through touch before words found their way between them. "Oh, Yuna," she said quietly, "you stubborn, impossible woman. You think I do not know that." Yuna looked down, but Luna reached up with her free hand and touched her cheek, careful and firm, the way only a younger sister could be with someone the rest of the galaxy feared. "Listen to me. If you come home and I am not standing at that door, then Sherry will be. Her girls will be. Tovan will be. Ford will complain loudly enough for the dead to hear him. Rhea will probably insult your landing procedure before welcoming you aboard. You do not get to call that emptiness." Luna's eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. "I want to be here. I want to be old and annoying and waiting in this chair just so I can accuse you of being late. But if time gets there before you do, then you remember this. I loved you while I was here, and that does not stop because my chair is empty." She squeezed Yuna's hand again, harder this time. "So you go do what you have to do, big sister. Build your shields. Train your fleets. Scare the dark so badly it regrets learning our name. But do not use me as a reason to break yourself before the war even reaches us." Yuna's breath trembled, but Luna gave her no room to hide from the comfort. "Come home when you can," Luna said. "And if I am still here, I will throw something at you for taking too long. If I am not, then you come home anyway. You hear me? Home does not vanish just because one old woman finally stops guarding the door." From the kitchen, Sherry stood with both hands braced against the counter, the forgotten tea cooling beside her. She had meant to give them privacy. She truly had. But Yuna's voice had carried just enough for the fragile words to reach her, and once they did, Sherry could not make herself move. The woman who had always seemed untouchable to her, the aunt who wore command like armor and joked through every wound, had sounded, for one terrible moment, like someone afraid of coming home to an empty room. Sherry swallowed hard and looked toward the sitting room doorway. She wanted to rush in, throw her arms around both of them, and promise with all the certainty of a daughter that Luna would always be there, that Yuna would always come back, that time would obey family if they loved each other fiercely enough. But Sherry was old enough to know better and young enough, compared to the women in the next room, to hate knowing better. So she did the only thing she could. She wiped at her eyes with the heel of one hand, straightened her shoulders, and picked up the tea tray. When she stepped into the sitting room, she did not pretend she had heard nothing. Her eyes were bright, but her voice held steady. "For the record," she said softly, "Mom is right. If you come home and she is not at the door, I will be. And if I am not fast enough, my girls will beat me there." Yuna turned toward her, caught between apology and gratitude, but Sherry shook her head before either could form. "No," she said gently. "Do not apologize for letting us hear the truth. We are your family too, Aunt Yuna. We do not get the classified files, and maybe we should not. But we can still carry the waiting part with you." Luna looked up at her daughter, pride and sadness crossing her face together. Sherry set the tray down with careful hands, then moved behind Luna's chair and rested one hand on her mother's shoulder. With the other, she reached toward Yuna. The gesture was simple, steady, and impossible to refuse. Yuna took her hand. For a moment, the three women remained joined in the quiet sitting room. Luna in her chair, Sherry standing behind her, and Yuna holding on as if the contact could anchor her against the pull of every duty waiting beyond the door. Sherry's voice softened. "You go save the galaxy if you have to," she said. "But when you are done being terrifying, come home and let us make you tea." "I should head out soon," Yuna said. Then, for one brief moment, her composure shifted, and the weight beneath her humor showed through. "I suppose I'll look 43 forever, at least until these implants finally wear down with age. When they do, maybe I'll be able to grow old normally again." Luna's expression sharpened, but her voice remained gentle, carrying the quiet authority only a sister could use. "Stop it, Yuna. Accept what happened. If my memories still serve me clearly, we had no choice back then. We were preparing for war with the Nova Empire more than 50 years ago." Yuna looked away first. The room had become too quiet, and for once, the silence did not belong to command, war, or secrets. It belonged to two sisters standing on opposite sides of time. "I know," she said, though the words came out rougher than she intended. "I know why we did it. I know why I agreed. I know every argument Edison made, every projected casualty report, every warning that said I would not survive the Nova Empire without those systems inside me." Her cybernetic fingers curled slowly against her palm. "But knowing why does not always make it easier to live with. Everyone else got to grow old in a straight line. You, Sherry, your girls. Time touched all of you honestly. It moved through your lives the way it was supposed to." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "With me, it feels like time keeps knocking, and the implants keep refusing to answer the door." Luna leaned back in her chair, studying her with the fierce patience of someone who had spent a lifetime loving a difficult woman. "Do you think I do not envy you sometimes?" she asked. Yuna looked at her sharply. Luna smiled faintly, tired but honest. "Not the pain, not the surgeries, not the command weight or the ghosts you carry, but the years, Yuna. I would be lying if I said I never wondered what it would feel like to have more of them, to stand up without my knees complaining, to look in the mirror and see the face I had before life took its share." She reached for Yuna's hand again, and this time Yuna let her take it without resistance. "But I would not trade my age for your burden. These wrinkles, these aches, every gray hair Sherry pretends not to notice. They mean I lived my life. They mean I got to raise my daughter, hold my granddaughters, argue in this house, forget things, remember things, and become someone the younger version of me never imagined." Luna squeezed her hand. "You did not lose the right to age, Yuna. You just took the long way around it. And when your implants finally wear down enough for time to catch you, I hope you do not meet it like an enemy. I hope you let it find you as a woman who survived long enough to be tired of surviving. Yuna's throat tightened. She had faced fleets without trembling, given orders that sent ships into fire, and held the line while entire empires tried to break her. But Luna's hand around hers was almost more than she could bear. "I do not know how to be that woman," she admitted. "Then learn," Luna said. "You learned command. You learned war. You learned how to hold everyone else together when the universe tried to tear them apart. Surely you can learn how to let yourself be old one day without treating it like a tactical failure." From beside Luna's chair, Sherry wiped at one eye and tried to turn the motion into adjusting her hair. "For the record," she said, voice thick but steady, "if Aunt Yuna ever does become a cranky old woman, I expect full family privileges. I want to complain about her eating habits, her sleep schedule, and whatever terrible boots she refuses to replace." Yuna blinked, then laughed softly despite the ache in her chest. "You are both far too comfortable planning my decline." "Someone has to," Luna said. "You would turn aging into a classified operation and forget to invite the family." The laughter that followed was small, fragile, and exactly what Yuna needed. It did not erase the fear of leaving, or the certainty that duty would soon pull her back toward Epsilon, patrol routes, sealed briefings, and the coming dark. But it reminded her that time was not only something that stole people away. Sometimes, time left a house standing, a sister waiting, a daughter listening, and a hand still reaching for hers. Yuna rose at last, slower than she needed to, because leaving too quickly felt like disrespecting the moment. Luna stood with Sherry's help, then pulled Yuna into one final embrace. This time, Yuna did not hold back. She wrapped her arms around her baby sister and let herself feel the years between them. The ones Luna had lived, the ones Yuna had outrun, and the ones neither of them could promise would be waiting when she returned. Chapter 16. After leaving Luna's house, Yuna did not head straight back to duty. The Romulus still had 10 hours remaining under the stand-down order, and for once, no urgent command summons pulled her toward the bridge. She decided she would return to the ship and rest in her personal office, surrounded by old photographs, quiet walls, and the familiar hum of the dreadnought that had become home in its own strange way. When her shuttle reached Earth's orbital station, however, she slowed before the transfer corridor to the docking bay. The station concourse stretched ahead of her, bright with shops, food stalls, civilian voices, and the kind of ordinary life that always seemed to exist just beyond the reach of war. Crew members on Liberty moved through the crowds with bags in hand and laughter in their voices, making the most of the hours she had given them. Yuna told herself she was only going to walk for a few minutes. Then she bought a small meal from a quiet vendor near the observation windows and ate while watching Earth turn below the station. After that, almost without planning to, she entered a shop she would normally have passed without a second glance. Its shelves were lined with hair products, skin creams, subtle cosmetics, and delicate things meant for people who expected to look in mirrors for reasons other than checking for damage. For several seconds, Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam stood there, like she had wandered into enemy territory. She had purchased weapons systems worth more than cities, ordered shipyard expansions, authorized classified defense platforms, and negotiated the protection of entire worlds. Yet a simple row of hair treatments and women's cosmetics made her hesitate like a cadet caught outside the wrong briefing room. Then she thought of Luna's home. She thought of Sherry's steady hand on her shoulder, of Ashley Richardson and Yuna Richardson waiting somewhere in the living future her sister had built, and of the promise she had made to come home if she could. The thought was almost embarrassing in its tenderness, but Yuna picked up a small bottle of hair product anyway. Then she chose a few simple cosmetics, nothing dramatic, Nothing that would make Ford ask questions with that unbearable sideways look of his. Just enough for someday. Someday, if the war allowed it. Someday, if the dark rising did not steal too much. Someday, if she walked back through Luna's door and found Ashley and young Yuna Richardson waiting there, older, laughing, and ready to see their impossible aunt, not only as a fleet admiral, not only as a legend, but as a woman who had tried, just once, to come home looking pretty for the people who loved her. Yuna paid quickly, tucked the small bag inside her coat, and left the shop before she could change her mind. Outside, the station's noise rolled around her again, full of footsteps, voices, food vendors, docking alerts, and crew laughter. For the first time in a long while, the sound did not feel like distraction. It felt like something worth protecting. By the time Yuna returned to the Romulus, the docking bay had settled into the strange quiet that came when most of the crew was still scattered across the station. A few mechanics remained on duty near the maintenance racks. A security team watched the boarding corridor, and one exhausted pilot slept upright against a cargo crate, with a half-eaten food wrap balanced on his knee. No one shouted. No one snapped to attention fast enough to make a scene. For once, the ship felt less like a war machine, and more like a house waiting for its family to come home. Ria's voice greeted her through the nearest speaker, softer than usual. "Welcome back, Fleet Admiral. Your crew has so far committed only minor acts of Liberty-related financial irresponsibility." Yuna glanced toward the ceiling. "Do I want details?" "Probably not," Destiny replied brightly. "But Commander Ford has purchased enough baked goods to qualify as a supply convoy." Despite herself, Yuna smiled. "Log it as tactical morale support." "Already done," Ria said. "I added a warning that excessive frosting may impair command dignity." Yuna crossed the docking bay with the small shopping bag tucked beneath her coat, feeling absurdly aware of its weight. She had carried heavier burdens without hesitation: classified weapons codes, casualty lists, treaties, last words. Yet the little bag of hair product and cosmetics seemed determined to embarrass her with every step. Ria noticed, of course. "You are walking like someone smuggling either contraband or feelings." "Neither," Yuna said too quickly. Destiny gasped softly through the speakers. "It is feelings." Confirmed. Yuna stopped beneath the speaker and looked up with the flat patience of a woman who had ended empires and was now being bullied by her own ship. "I can still assign both of you to monitor waste recycling reports for the rest of the stand-down," Ria answered at once, respectfully withdrawing all emotional observations. "Coward," Destiny whispered. "Survivor," Ria corrected. Yuna shook her head and continued toward the inner lift. The teasing should have annoyed her more than it did. Instead, it followed her like warmth through the corridor, softening the edges of a day that had begun with goodbye and somehow found room for small, ridiculous hope. Her personal office opened to her command signature with a quiet hiss. The room was dim, lit mostly by the slow movement of Earth's reflected glow through the viewport. Yuna placed the shopping bag on her desk beside the old photographs, then stood there for a long moment, staring at it as if it were some newly discovered artifact from a civilization she barely understood. She took the items out one by one: a small bottle of hair product, a compact case of understated color, a soft brush sealed in clear wrapping. Nothing extravagant, nothing that should have made her throat tighten. But as she arranged them beside the photograph of Luna's younger face, the simple objects became proof of something she had almost forgotten how to want. A someday. Yuna lowered herself into her chair and let the silence gather around her. She had built entire defensive strategies on impossible timelines. She had ordered fleets across dark borders and stood before maps covered in threats no one else was ready to name. Yet imagining herself sitting in Luna's home years from now, letting Ashley and young Yuna Richardson fuss over her hair, felt more dangerous than any battlefield. Because battle plans asked her to survive. That little bag asked her to believe she might come back. A soft chime sounded at the door. Yuna swept the cosmetics into the open drawer with the speed of a commander hiding classified evidence. "Come in." The door opened, and Commander Ford stepped inside, carrying a paper bag that smelled strongly of sugar, butter, and bad judgment. His eyes moved from Yuna's face to the suspiciously closed drawer, then back again. Ford stood in the doorway for half a second longer than protocol required. He had followed Yuna through wars, emergency councils, grief-sharpened briefings, and enough impossible decisions to make younger officers age by association. He knew the difference between the fleet admiral pretending nothing was wrong and Yuna Adam trying to hide something very human in a desk drawer. His gaze returned to her face, and the teasing he had been preparing faded before it reached his mouth. Something about her was different. Not in posture. She still sat like command itself had been carved into her bones. Not in expression. She still wore calm with professional precision. But there was a softness at the edges now, a quiet looseness in her shoulders, as if some part of her had remembered there was life beyond alerts, casualty projections, and sealed threat files. Ford lifted the bakery bag slightly. "I brought tactical morale support," he said. "Also, if anyone asks, this was an official supply run and not emotional eating disguised as leadership." Yuna leaned back in her chair, grateful for the ordinary absurdity of him. "How many baked goods did you buy, Commander?" Ford looked down into the bag as if the answer might legally incriminate him. "Enough to support morale across several departments, depending on whether Rhea audits the distribution pattern." "I already have," Rhea said from the office speaker. Commander Ford purchased 3 pastries for himself and labeled the rest as Command Resilience Assets. Ford pointed at the ceiling. "That is an invasion of bakery privacy." Destiny chimed in cheerfully. "There is no such legal protection under DEATHCORE supply doctrine." Yuna almost laughed, but Ford saw the way the sound caught before it became easy. He stepped inside and let the door close behind him. The office returned to its quiet, warmed only by earthlight and the smell of sugar. Ford set the bag on the desk, carefully avoiding the drawer she had closed too quickly. "You look different," he said. Yuna's eyes narrowed with immediate suspicion. "That is a dangerous sentence to say to a woman who outranks you." "I am 69 years old," Ford replied. "At this point, danger is mostly paperwork, with better lighting." That earned the faint smile he had been hoping for. He took the chair across from her without waiting to be invited, the way only someone who had survived 5 decades at her side could get away with. "I do not mean your face," he said more gently. "You still look unfairly younger than both of us deserve to tolerate. I mean you." Something eased. Yuna looked toward the closed drawer. The movement was small, but Ford caught it. Of course he did. Jerry Ford had spent too many years watching her hands hover over firing controls, casualty lists, and old photographs not to notice when her attention betrayed her. "I visited Luna," Yuna said. Ford's expression softened at once. "How is she?" "Old," Yuna said, with the blunt honesty of a sister still afraid of the word. Then her voice softened. "Stubborn. Sharp. More alive than she has any right to be after raising Sherry and surviving me." Ford smiled. "Then she is unchanged in all the ways that matter." Yuna nodded, but her eyes stayed on the drawer. "She told me to stop treating aging like a tactical failure." Ford sat back, considering that. "Smart woman." "Annoying woman," Yuna corrected. "But yes." The humor faded gently. Ford reached into the bakery bag and pulled out a wrapped pastry, placing it on the desk like an offering to a difficult deity. "So," he said, "does the mysterious drawer have anything to do with looking different?" Yuna went very still. Ford lifted both hands. "I am not asking as your commander. I am asking as the last original fool stubborn enough to still be here." Yuna stared at him for a long moment, then let out a breath that was almost surrender. She opened the drawer only a few inches and looked down at the hair product, the compact, and the soft brush, as if they might report her to the Admiralty. Ford did not laugh. That, more than anything, made Yuna look back at him. "I bought them for someday," she said quietly. "If I get back to Luna's house, if Ashley and young Yuna are there, if I have enough of myself left to walk through that door as something other than Fleet Admiral Adam." Ford's face changed in a way she rarely saw. The old humor did not vanish. It stepped aside for respect. "Yuna," he said softly, "that is not weakness." "It feels ridiculous," she admitted. "I can order the construction of 10-layer planetary shields without flinching. But buying something pretty made me feel like I was doing something dangerous." Ford gave a quiet nod. "Because shields are for everyone else. That drawer is for you." The words landed harder than he probably intended. Yuna looked away, not because she disagreed, but because agreeing felt too exposed. Rhea spoke then, very softly. "For the record, Fleet Admiral, I approve of the drawer." Destiny added, "I also approve. However, I strongly recommend practicing before allowing Sherry, Ashley, or young Yuna Richardson to form a committee around your face." Ford winced. A family cosmetic committee sounds more dangerous than a boarding action. "Exactly," Destiny said. "Preparation is survival." Yuna closed the drawer again, but this time she did not do it like she was hiding contraband. She did it slowly, carefully, as if placing a promise somewhere safe. "Do not tell the crew," she said. Ford placed one hand over his heart. "Fleet Admiral, I would never reveal classified cosmetic operations." Rhea's voice warmed by a fraction. "Operation Someday has been sealed under family-level encryption." Yuna looked up at the speaker, then at Ford, and the softness he had noticed at the door returned. It was small, fragile, almost hidden beneath decades of command. But it was there. Ford picked up one of the pastries and slid it toward her. "Eat," he said. "If you are going to scare the dark, build shields for half the galaxy. And someday, let your great-nieces make you look pretty. You might as well start by surviving dessert." Yuna stared at the pastry, then at Ford. "That may be the worst strategic recommendation you have ever made." Ford smiled. "And yet, history shows my worst recommendations occasionally destroy 4 capital battleships by accident." Yuna laughed then, not loudly, not for long, but honestly. Outside the viewport, Earth turned beneath them. The stand-down clock kept moving. Duty waited. The dark rising waited. But for a few quiet minutes in her office, with Ford across from her, Rhea and Destiny listening, and a drawer full of impossible hope beside her knee, Yuna allowed herself to eat something sweet, and believe that someday was not a foolish thing to carry. With 1 hour remaining in the stand-down order, Destiny's voice moved through the crew's personal comms, gentle enough not to ruin their last moments of liberty, but clear enough to remind every soul aboard the Romulus that duty was returning. Across the orbital station, crew members paused over unfinished meals, closed shopping bags, ended calls with family, and began making their way back toward the docking corridors. The day of rest was almost over. In her personal office, Yuna heard the announcement and looked down at the half-finished pastry Ford had bullied her into eating. The softness from the last few hours did not vanish all at once. It retreated slowly, like sunlight leaving a room. Little by little, the familiar lines of command returned to her face. The woman who had laughed over dessert, hidden cosmetics in a drawer, and carried a fragile hope called someday, was still there. But the fleet admiral began rising over her again. Commander Ford saw the change without needing to be told. He had watched it happen too many times, over too many years. The small tightening around Yuna's eyes, the straightening of her posture, the way private feeling folded itself neatly beneath duty. He did not interrupt it. Instead, he stood, gathered the empty bakery bag, and opened his command slate. "I will begin recovery procedures," Ford said. "Docking status, crew recall, patrol routing, and departure prep for Epsilon." Yuna nodded once. "Good. I want every department accounted for before the final stand-down minute expires. No one misses departure because they are arguing with a noodle vendor or trying to smuggle station desserts past medical." Ria's voice slipped through the office speakers with dry approval. "I have already flagged 3 dessert-related concealment attempts, 2 questionable souvenir purchases, and 1 crew member who appears to believe a decorative lamp qualifies as mission equipment." Ford sighed. "Please tell me it is not from Docking Bay 12. "Would you like me to lie?" Destiny asked brightly. Yuna allowed one last faint smile, then closed the drawer that held her small bag from the station. The motion was gentle, almost private. Operation Someday remained safely tucked away. Now the Romulus needed Fleet Admiral Adam again. "Send the final recall," Yuna said. "Once the crew is aboard, we undock, form up, and head for Epsilon. I want training schedules ready before we arrive, and patrol briefing packets distributed to every department head." Ford's hands moved across his slate. "Aye, Fleet Admiral. Docking procedure will begin as soon as station control clears the departure lane. Patrol orders will be updated for the Epsilon route, and I will have the training rotation queued before the last stragglers find the boarding ramp." Outside the office, the ship began to wake from rest. Corridors filled with returning footsteps, laughter softened into duty reports, and Liberty bags disappeared into lockers. The Romulus was gathering herself again, not as a shelter, not as a hidden home above Earth, but as a dreadnought preparing to move. Yuna stepped out of her office with Ford at her side. By the time they reached the bridge, command had fully returned to her face. The crew would train at Epsilon, patrol the borders, and prepare for briefings that would shape the next phase of the fleet's readiness. The stand-down had given them breath. Now duty was calling them back into motion. By then, the Romulus was 4 days into FTL travel, with 4 more days remaining before she reached Epsilon. The rest of the patrol fleet followed in disciplined formation behind her. 1 mid-size battleship serving as support, and 2 frigates keeping station along the outer lane. All of them had departed Earth's orbital station together after the stand-down order. Some crew members had returned refreshed, grateful, and ready for duty. Others had clearly used their liberty with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested regret would be arriving shortly after breakfast. For the most part, the ship had settled back into normal rhythm. Engines hummed steadily beneath the deck. Reports moved through the bridge in clean intervals. Ria and Destiny were quiet for once, which Ford claimed was either a miracle or a sign that they were planning something. Even Yuna allowed herself to believe, for a few peaceful minutes, that the journey to Epsilon might pass without incident. Then Weapons Officer Cherry Cortez stood from her station to get coffee. She had been fighting sleep since the second navigation review, and the promise of caffeine had become less of a preference and more of a survival requirement. Cherry crossed the bridge, collected her cup, and turned back toward the weapons console with the slow, careful focus of someone determined not to look tired in front of a fleet admiral. The universe, naturally, chose that moment to betray her. Cherry's boot caught the edge of her chair. Her coffee tilted one way, her body went the other, and her hand slapped the weapons console in a desperate attempt to keep herself upright. A warning chirped. A targeting light flashed. Before anyone could fully process the disaster unfolding in slow motion, the forward burst cannon fired. The discharge lasted only a few seconds, just a small pulse along the empty FTL lane, but it was enough to turn every head on the bridge. Cherry froze with one hand still on the console and the other wrapped around a coffee cup that had somehow survived the incident. "Oops," she whispered. Commander Ford turned toward her so slowly that several junior officers immediately decided their consoles were the most fascinating objects in the galaxy. "What do you mean, oops?" he snapped. "That is a big fucking oops, Officer Cortez." Cherry's face went pale. "Commander, I tripped." "Clearly," Ford said. "Most people trip and hit the floor. You tripped and tried to start a war with empty space." Ria's voice came through the bridge speakers, far too calm to be innocent. "For clarification, the burst cannon discharged for 2.8 seconds. No Allied ship, civilian craft, debris field, station, planet, moon, or emotionally fragile cargo container was harmed." Destiny added brightly, "Coffee-related weapons incidents are now being tracked as a new category of operational risk." Yuna stared at Cherry for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then her gaze softened with the faintest trace of nostalgia. "Fortunately, there was no one in our FTL lane," she said. "And fortunately for you, Officer Cortez, this ship has a long and embarrassing history of weapons, officers surviving accidental brilliance." Ford's eyes narrowed. "Fleet Admiral, if you are about to bring up the gravity torpedoes again, I request permission to leave the bridge." Yuna looked at him. "Denied." The bridge stayed silent for half a heartbeat. Then Ria said, "Archiving incident under Officer Cortez discovers coffee, attacks the void." Destiny chimed in. "Cross-referenced with Commander Ford discovers chair, defeats Empire." Cherry lowered her coffee cup with both hands, her dignity badly damaged, but still technically functional. "Permission to return to my station, Fleet Admiral?" Yuna nodded. "Granted." "And Officer Cortez?" Cherry straightened. "Yes, Fleet Admiral." "Next time," Yuna said, "drink the coffee before you reach the weapons console." Cherry swallowed. "Aye, Fleet Admiral." Several hours later, Destiny's voice returned through the bridge speakers, crisp and cheerful enough to sound suspiciously pleased that no one had fired anything else. 3 days until approach vector to Epsilon." A few officers glanced toward Cherry Cortez before they could stop themselves. Cherry kept both hands carefully visible above her console, nowhere near anything labeled fire. Yuna rose from her command chair, smoothing the front of her uniform as the ship's steady FTL hum moved beneath the deck. "Commander Ford, you have the bridge," she said. "I will be in my office reviewing the docking and security files before the Romulus reaches Epsilon platform." Ford straightened at once. "Aye, aye, Fleet Admiral." Then, after the smallest pause, he added, "And for the record, I will ensure the bridge remains fully operational, under control, and free of beverage-based weapons incidents." Cherry stared very hard at her console. "That feels unfairly specific, Commander." "So was the cannon discharge," Ford replied. Yuna let the bridge have its quiet laughter, then walked toward the lift. Behind her, Destiny whispered through the speakers, "Updating bridge policy. Coffee must remain at least 2 meters away from anything capable of humiliating the fleet." Ria added, "A sensible rule. Late, but sensible." Down in Docking Bay 12, Major Merrick stood near the DEATHCORE squadron and found himself staring at an old starfighter parked beneath the bay lights. DEATHCORE 5, his old bird. 50 years had passed since he had flown her into war, but the lines of the fighter still knew him. The sight pulled him backward before he could stop it, dragging him into the smoke, alarms, and screaming comms of the Slither King engagement. Back then, Merrick had been a first lieutenant in the cockpit of DEATHCORE 5, fighting so hard his hands ached inside his gloves. The Slither King interceptors were everywhere, flashing across his canopy in green fire and broken metal. Major Roberts had been ahead of him, carving a path through the enemy formation, with the kind of calm that made younger pilots believe they could survive impossible odds. Merrick remembered the warning tone that screamed when two Slither King fighters dropped onto his tail. He had been seconds from dying when Roberts cut across his flight path and blasted one interceptor apart, forcing the second to break away. "Stay with me, Preacher," Roberts had ordered over the comms. "I am not losing you today." Merrick had barely managed to answer before DEATHCORE 9, a rookie flying his first real engagement, called for help from the far side of the debris field. Roberts rolled his fighter through a curtain of plasma fire and pulled Merrick into a tight wing formation. Together, they cut across the debris field, weaving between shattered hull plates and burning engine cores, while Slither King pilots tried to box them in from both sides. Merrick squeezed the trigger until his cannons flashed white, ripping through the lead interceptor just as Roberts clipped the wing from another. The enemy formation broke apart for half a second, and in that half second, DEATHCORE 5 and Roberts's starfighter became a blade slicing straight through the storm. Then the comms erupted with overlapping distress calls. DEATHCORE 7 had lost shields. DEATHCORE 9 was spinning near a wrecked cruiser, his rookie panic bleeding through the channel as three Slither King fighters circled him like knives. Merrick and Roberts split without needing orders. Roberts climbed high and drew two attackers after him, while Merrick dove low through the wreckage, skimming so close to torn armor plating that sparks scraped across his canopy. He fired once, twice, and the first enemy fighter vanished into the cruiser's broken frame. The second tried to follow DEATHCORE 9 into open space, but Merrick cut across its nose and forced it straight into Roberts's guns. Merrick had turned DEATHCORE 5 hard, engines screaming, and dove toward the rookie. He caught one enemy fighter with a burst from his cannons and drove the second away, long enough for DEATHCORE 9 to limp clear. Then he swung back to catch up with Major Roberts. That was when he saw them. Two Slither King interceptors dropping from above, locking onto Roberts's starfighter before anyone could warn him. "Major, break!" Merrick shouted. But the words came too late. The interceptors fired together. Roberts's fighter bloomed in a horrible storm of hellfire, vanishing in a flash that burned itself into Merrick's memory forever. For a moment, he was still there, trapped in the cockpit, listening to static where Roberts's voice should have been. "Major? Major, are you okay?" Lorne asked. Merrick blinked hard. The alarms vanished. The fire disappeared. Docking Bay 12 returned around him, bright, loud, and painfully real. He drew a slow breath and looked away from DEATHCORE 5 before the memory could pull him under again. "Sorry, Lorne," he said quietly. "I was thinking of something." Then his gaze shifted back to the old starfighter, and a crooked smile tugged at his mouth. "Hey, rookie," Major Merrick added, "how would you like to pilot DEATHCORE 5? My old bird." Private First Class Lorne Costello swallowed hard, staring at the fighter as if Merrick had just offered him the keys to a legend. "Major Merrick, don't play with my heart," Lorne said. "DEATHCORE 5 is one badass ugly bird. Yes, sir, I would be honored." He snapped into a salute so sharp and eager, he looked like a child, waiting to receive a stolen lollipop from a candy store. For a heartbeat, the rest of the squadron only stared. Then the docking bay came alive with low whistles, muttered disbelief, and a few badly hidden grins. One veteran pilot leaned toward another and whispered, "Did the Major just hand the rookie a war relic?" A mechanic near DEATHCORE 5 wiped grease from his hands and gave the old fighter a respectful look. "That ugly bird survived more hell than half this, Bay," he said. "If the kid gets her flying clean, I'll buy him a drink." Then he squinted at Lorne and added, "But if she starts leaking coolant, don't panic. That's not a malfunction. That's just DEATHCORE 5 sweating judgment." Another squad member snorted. "If he scratches her, Merrick will bury him under the runway." Lorne's salute wavered only slightly as the laughter rolled around him, but his eyes stayed locked on DEATHCORE 5 with awe. Merrick turned slowly toward the squad, one eyebrow raised. The joking died at once. "Laugh all you want," he said, his voice rough but proud. "That bird brought me home when better pilots did not make it back. If Lorne flies her, he does it with respect." The squad members straightened, the humor giving way to something older and quieter. One by one, they looked from Merrick to DEATHCORE 5, and then to Lorne. This time, no one laughed. "Your flight training begins once we reach Epsilon," Major Merrick said. Then he looked Lorne dead in the eye and added, "And Lorne, if you scratch her paint, I will hand you the smallest paintbrush in the universe and make you patch her up until she looks brand new." Private First Class. Lorne Costello swallowed hard all over again. Around him, the rest of the DEATHCORE squadron finally lost the battle with discipline and burst out laughing. The mood in the bay shifted from reverent silence to full-blown squadron chaos. The pilots laughed with the kind of relief that came after a heavy memory had finally loosened its grip, while the mechanics grinned like they had just been promised front-row seats to the rookie's first disaster. Even the older veterans, who had gone quiet when Merrick spoke of DEATHCORE 5's past, let their shoulders relax. The teasing was loud, merciless, and affectionate all at once. To them, Lorne had just been given an honor wrapped in a death sentence, and every one of them knew he would carry both with pride. Merrick let the laughter run for a moment, then stepped closer to Lorne until the noise around them became background thunder. "You still want her?" he asked. Lorne looked from DEATHCORE 5 to Merrick, then swallowed. "Yes, sir. More than ever." Merrick studied him with the hard patience of a man measuring more than a rookie's excitement. "Good. Then understand something. You are not being handed a prize. You are being trusted with a graveyard, a memory, and a machine that kept better men alive long enough to die somewhere else." Lorne's grin faded, replaced by something steadier. "I understand, Major. I will not treat her like a toy." Merrick's eyes narrowed. "You will treat her like she is listening." Lorne glanced at the battered starfighter and gave a nervous little nod. "With respect, sir, after everything I have heard today, I am pretty sure she is." Merrick held the stern look for half a second before the corner of his mouth twitched. "Smart answer, rookie. Keep giving those, and DEATHCORE 5 might decide not to embarrass you on your first takeoff." Lorne straightened. "And if she does?" Merrick clapped him once on the shoulder. "Then you thank her for the lesson and pretend you meant to do it." After the words left him, Merrick kept his hand on Lorne's shoulder for a second longer than he meant to. The laughter around them was still there, warm and rowdy. But inside Merrick, the sound faded beneath older voices. Roberts had trusted him once, trusted a young pilot called Preacher to survive long enough to become something more than frightened hands on a flight stick. Now Merrick was doing the same for Lorne, and the realization hurt in a way he had not expected. DEATHCORE 5 was not just a fighter to him. She was smoke, blood, rescue calls, names that never came home, and one major's final order burned forever into his memory. Letting a rookie climb into her cockpit felt like opening a sealed wound, but it also felt right. Old birds were not meant to sit beneath bay lights forever, and old ghosts were not meant to have the last word. If Lorne could honor her, if he could learn from her, then maybe DEATHCORE 5 would carry something forward besides grief. In Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam's office, the lights were low and the file displays glowed across her desk as she reviewed the latest readiness reports. Destiny's voice chimed softly through the room speakers, quieter than usual. "Admiral, did you hear? Major Merrick is finally letting go of DEATHCORE 5. He assigned Private First Class Lorne Costello, call sign Mechanical Lover, to begin flight training once we reach Epsilon." Yuna leaned back in her chair, one eyebrow rising as the news settled in. "Well," she said dryly, "that is a surprise. A genuine goddamn miracle." Commander Ford, seated near the side display with a mug of station coffee in hand, paused halfway through taking a sip. "Merrick is letting someone else fly DEATHCORE 5? He asked, as if Destiny had just reported that the laws of physics had taken personal leave. He lowered the mug slowly. "Admiral, I have seen that man threaten maintenance crews over dust on her wing panels. If he is handing the rookie the cockpit, then either Lorne is braver than he looks, or Merrick finally lost an argument with his own ghosts." Yuna glanced toward him, her dry smile fading into something softer. "Maybe both," she said. Ford considered that, then gave a small nod. "Then I suppose Mechanical Lover had better learn fast. DEATHCORE 5 may be ugly, old, and temperamental, but if Merrick trusts him with her, that kid just inherited one hell of a legacy." Chapter 18. By the time the Romulus reached planet Epsilon, 3 days of FTL travel had folded behind her, like a bad dream refusing to leave completely. The ancient dreadnought dropped from faster-than-light speed above the planet's orbital defense lanes, with her support ship still in formation and her crew already shifting from travel rhythm into station discipline. Planet Epsilon turned below them in pale bands of cloud and blue-gray atmosphere, quiet for now. But the moment docking control cleared the final approach, Docking Bay 12 came alive with the familiar noise of engines, tool carts, shouted orders, and pilots pretending they were not nervous. 2 days later, Docking Bay 12 no longer looked like a docking bay. It looked like a war memory being tuned for practice. Starfighters sat in launch rows beneath the bay lights, their hulls open for final checks, while mechanics cleared power couplings, pilots ran pre-flight diagnostics, and training officers moved through the deck with tablets full of warning labels that everyone fully intended to ignore responsibly. At the center of it all stood Major Merrick, arms folded, eyes narrowed, and looking far too pleased for a man about to release 20 pilots into a live starfighter exercise. "Listen up," Merrick barked, and the bay snapped toward him with the kind of discipline pilots used when they wanted to look brave before doing something stupid at high speed. "Today we are running a 20-pilot squadron exercise, 5 versus 5 team rotations. Live training grid, weapons safe, targeting systems active, and enough rules to keep medical from blaming me personally." His gaze swept across the line of rookies and assigned pilots. Private First Class Lorne Costello, DEATHCORE 5. Private Kim Chu, DEATHCORE 9. Private Helena Rothschild, DEATHCORE 7. Private First Class Mark Anthony, DEATHCORE 8. Private First Class Benji Chan, DEATHCORE 6. "You 5 are up first." Lorne felt every eye in the bay shift toward him for half a second, then toward DEATHCORE 5. The old starfighter sat waiting with her ugly angles, scarred plates, and stubborn cockpit canopy catching the overhead lights, like she already knew the rookie was trying not to look terrified. Merrick saw the look on Lorne's face and smiled just enough to be dangerous. "And before any of you start feeling brave," he added, "the captain of DEATHCORE 1 will be joining another team to test what you've got." A groan moved through the squadron. Merrick's smile widened. "Good. Fear means your brain is still installed." He raised one finger. "Simple rules. Capture the enemy flag or kill as many enemies as you can. Weapons are safe, but the targeting systems will count every clean shot. If your fighter registers as killed, you are out. Whatever team has more pilots alive at the end of the live training exercise wins." Merrick paused, then gave them the look of a man who had never met a serious briefing he could not ruin with dessert. "And the losing team buys me chocolate cake if we ever reach Earth again." That broke the tension exactly the way Merrick intended. Pilots laughed, mechanics groaned, and Benji Chan raised one hand. "Major, what kind of chocolate cake?" Merrick pointed at him. "The expensive kind, Private. Motivation matters." Ria's voice rolled through the base speakers. "For the record, I support training incentives involving dessert. They appear to improve obedience by 31%. Destiny added, "And fear of frosting debt is universal." Minutes later, the launch lights went green. DEATHCORE 5 lifted from the deck beneath Lorne's hands, her old frame vibrating through the control yoke like a heartbeat with opinions. The cockpit sealed around him. The training reticle came alive across the canopy in pale blue arcs, followed by the targeting system, range markers, simulated shield status, and a flashing weapon-safe confirmation. Ahead of him, Kim Chu and DEATHCORE 9 rolled into formation. Helena Rothschild took DEATHCORE 7 to his left. Mark Anthony held DEATHCORE 8, high and steady, and Benji Chan, in DEATHCORE 6, slipped into the rearguard position. The 5 starfighters burst out of docking bay 12 and into the training zone above Epsilon, where holographic boundary markers glowed against the black. Red Team appeared on the far side of the grid, their flag beacon pulsing behind a drifting field of training pylons and sensor buoys. DEATHCORE 1 sat among them like a shark, pretending to be part of the scenery. The moment the start tone sounded, space went insane. Red target boxes flashed across Lorne's canopy. Training beams streaked past him in harmless light, but his cockpit screamed as if every miss wanted to become real. He shoved DEATHCORE 5 into a hard roll, dropped beneath a pylon, and came up behind an enemy fighter so close his reticle swallowed the target marker whole. The lock tone sang once. Lorne fired. The enemy fighter's training system flashed red. "Kill confirmed," Ria announced. "DEATHCORE 5 scores first contact." "Not bad, mechanical lover," Merrick said over the training channel, though Lorne could hear the smile in his voice. "Now, do it again, without letting DEATHCORE 1 eat you." Lorne barely had time to curse before the captain of DEATHCORE 1 dropped out of the upper arc and painted his canopy with a lock warning. Lorne kicked the old fighter sideways, cut thrust, and let DEATHCORE 5 fall backward like a brick that had suddenly remembered it was angry. DEATHCORE 1 overshot by half a second. That was all Lorne needed. He punched the engines. DEATHCORE 5 surged forward with an ugly roar, cutting between 2 pylons, while Kim Chu and Helena Rothschild split wide to draw fire. Mark Anthony took a simulated hit protecting Benji Chan, but Benji used the opening to tag another red fighter out of the match. Lorne saw the enemy flag beacon dead ahead, bright and arrogant behind a shield of moving targets. His reticle danced, his hand steadied. The old bird answered him like she had been waiting 50 years to show a rookie how legends flew. DEATHCORE 1 came for him again, fast and clean, the captain's training beams carving blue lines across Lorne's path. Lorne dove beneath the first burst, rolled through the second, then snapped DEATHCORE 5 into a climbing spiral so tight the inertial dampeners barked warnings at him. For 1 perfect second, the enemy flag filled his canopy. He armed the capture pulse, held the line while his targeting system screamed, and fired. The beacon flashed gold. "Flag capture confirmed," Destiny announced, sounding far too delighted. "DEATHCORE 5 has stolen the cake!" The training grid froze around them. Simulated kill counts shimmered across every cockpit display. Lorne's team had lost 2 fighters, but Red Team had lost 3, and their flag. More importantly, DEATHCORE 5 was still alive. Merrick's voice entered the channel slowly, carrying rough pride beneath the usual bite. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "The ugly bird still knows how to dance." Lorne sat in the cockpit with his heart pounding, hands shaking against the controls, and a grin spreading across his face so wide it almost hurt. For the first time, DEATHCORE 5 did not feel like Merrick's old fighter. She felt like a challenge he might actually be worthy of answering. Above the main bay floor, behind the armored glass of Docking Bay 12 Command Control, Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam had been watching the entire exercise in silence. The command room overlooked every launch row, maintenance lane, and recovery cradle in the bay. But its real purpose lived across the wall of tactical screens: starfighter rotations, training flight schedules, kill count data, squadron readiness charts, and long-range war preparation plans. Merrick had been building one brutal drill at a time. From there, every fighter below looked small. Every rookie mistake looked obvious. Every spark of talent looked impossible to ignore. Major Merrick entered command control, still carrying the training headset in one hand and a data slate in the other. He was already muttering about tomorrow's flight blocks, rotation stress, and which squadron needed to stop treating formation discipline like a polite suggestion. Then he looked up and froze. Fleet Admiral Adam stood near the forward glass, with her hands folded behind her back, her gaze still on DEATHCORE 5 as it coasted back toward the recovery path. Merrick straightened so quickly the slate nearly slipped from his grip. "Fleet Admiral," he said, "I didn't realize you were watching." Yuna did not turn away from the glass right away. Below them, Lorne's fighter settled into docking approach, old hull lights flickering across DEATHCORE 5's scarred frame. A faint grin touched Yuna's face, one edged with memory instead of amusement. "He reminds me of someone back in the old days," she said. Merrick glanced down toward DEATHCORE 5, then back at her. "Did you mean Major Roberts?" he asked. Yuna finally turned, and the look she gave him was sharp enough to make a younger officer reconsider breathing. Then her mouth curved into a grin full of old nostalgia. "No, you dumb monkey," she said. "I was talking about you. Also Lorne Costello." Merrick blinked once, caught between insult and honor, while Yuna looked back through the glass at the returning fighter. "Roberts had courage," she said quietly. "You had stubbornness. That kid down there looks like he might have both, if you do not scare it out of him first." Merrick let out a quiet breath through his nose. "With respect, Fleet Admiral, that kid nearly clipped a pylon on his second pass and almost let DEATHCORE 1 bait him into a vertical stall." Yuna's grin did not fade. And then he recovered, used the stall as a drop maneuver, and stole the flag from under a better pilot's nose. Merrick looked at her sideways. "You enjoyed that?" "Of course I did," Yuna said. "I am old, not dead." Merrick sighed and leaned one shoulder against the edge of the tactical console, careful not to actually touch anything that might beep at him. "He worries me," he admitted. "Not because he is bad, because he is not. Bad pilots are easy. You scare them straight, wash them out, or keep them away from machines that turn poor judgment into funerals. Lorne listens to the fighter. That is harder." Yuna finally turned fully toward him. "Harder because you cannot control it?" Merrick's jaw tightened. "Harder because I know exactly what happens when a pilot starts trusting instinct before experience catches up." Yuna studied him in silence, then looked back through the armored glass. Below them, DEATHCORE 5 settled into her cradle and released a slow breath of cooling vapor across the deck. "You trusted instinct before experience caught up," she said. Merrick gave a humorless little laugh. "And Roberts had to drag me out of enough fires to prove it." "Yes," Yuna said. "And then, one day, he was gone, and you were the one dragging rookies out of fires." Merrick said nothing. The command control screens flickered softly around them, painting old scars across his face in blue light. "DEATHCORE 5 remembers too much," Merrick said at last. "Every panel in that cockpit has a ghost sitting behind it. Roberts. The rookies we lost. The ones I saved too late. I put Lorne in that bird because he looked at her like she was alive, not like she was a trophy." He swallowed, then forced the roughness out of his voice. "But part of me keeps wanting to pull him back before she teaches him the same lessons she taught me." Yuna's voice softened, but not enough to lose its edge. "Then teach him the lesson, without making him inherit the wound." Merrick looked at her then. "That easy, huh?" "No," Yuna said. "If it were easy, I would assign it to someone with fewer bad habits." Merrick snorted despite himself. "That was almost kind." "Do not get used to it," she replied. "You are still a dumb monkey." Merrick rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes returning to the bay. "If he keeps flying like that, the squadron is going to start believing in him before he believes in himself." Yuna nodded once. "Good. Belief is useful. Worship is dangerous. Make sure they know the difference." Merrick gave her a sidelong look. "And if he gets cocky?" Yuna's smile returned, small and wicked. "Then let DEATHCORE 5 humble him. Old fighters are very good at that." Merrick looked back down at the bay, where DEATHCORE 5 was being guided into its cradle, and Lorne was probably still trying to convince his hands to stop shaking. For once, Merrick had no quick answer. The old training plans glowed behind him, full of schedules, squadron blocks, emergency drills, patrol simulations, and the ugly math of preparing rookies for a war none of them truly understood yet. Yuna softened her voice by a fraction. "Keep training him hard, Major, but do not forget to let him become his own pilot." Merrick gave a slow nod. "Yes, Fleet Admiral." Then, after a beat, he added, "And for the record, ma'am, dumb monkey feels unnecessarily accurate." Yuna's grin widened. "Good. Then you are learning." When Lorne finally brought DEATHCORE 5 back into Docking Bay 12, every light on the recovery lane seemed to catch the old fighter's scarred hull like it had just returned from a real battle. The landing struts touched the deck with a heavy metallic thud, and for one breath, the entire bay waited to see if the rookie would stumble out pale, shaking, and ready to apologize to gravity. Instead, the canopy lifted, vapor curled off the frame, and Lorne climbed down with his flight gloves still trembling in one hand and a stunned grin he could not quite hide. Then Docking Bay 12 erupted. Featherheads leaned over railings and whooped like the match had been a fleet championship. Ground pounders pounded armor-gloved fists against cargo crates, happy to cheer any pilot who had made DEATHCORE 1 chase empty air. Mechanics whistled from beneath open engine panels. The aviation crew, who had watched every turn, stall, drop, and flag capture on the training monitors, were the loudest of all. They clapped, shouted, and stomped their boots until the old bay sounded less like a military deck and more like a victory arena. Someone from the aviation crew cupped both hands around his mouth and shouted, "Well, look at that! Mechanical lover found his click." The bay exploded all over again. Lorne froze halfway down the ladder, face flushing red as every pilot, marine, and mechanic in earshot laughed like the joke had just been entered into official squadron history. He looked toward DEATHCORE 5, then back at the cheering crowd, and finally gave a small, embarrassed wave that only made them cheer louder. Major Merrick stood near the recovery line with his arms folded, trying very hard not to look proud and failing in a way only the veterans noticed. "All right, that is enough," he barked over the noise. "If you people cheer any louder, the rookie will start thinking he knows how to fly." The laughter rolled through the bay again. Lorne straightened at once. "I do not think that, Major." Merrick pointed at him. "Good. Keep not thinking that. DEATHCORE 5 hates arrogance almost as much as I do. One of the ground pounders cupped his hands around his mouth. Come on, Major. Let the kid have it. That was a damn fine run, a mechanic shouted from under DEATHCORE 7's wing. Best rookie flag grab I've seen in years. Merrick slowly turned his head toward them, his expression carved from stone and poor tolerance. You all done building him a statue? He asked. Because if you are, make sure it has room at the bottom for the words. Still needs training. The Bay laughed, but Merrick's eyes cut back to Lorne with something almost warm behind the glare. You flew well, Costello. I will say that once, so listen carefully and treasure it like your last clean uniform. You flew well. Lorne blinked, as if the words had hit harder than enemy fire. Thank you, Major. Merrick jabbed one finger toward him. Do not thank me yet. Praise is not a license to get stupid. That bird gave you a chance today. You earned one good flight, not ownership of the sky. He raised his voice so the whole bay heard him. And the rest of you, cheer all you want. But if I catch anyone treating one good training match like he just ended a war, I will assign the whole bay formation drills until Epsilon files a noise complaint. A Featherhead pilot near the rail lifted both hands. So respectful cheering only, Major? Merrick glared up at him. Respectful, brief, and preferably quieter than an engine failure. The pilot grinned. Yes, Major. Respectful cheering from mechanical lover. A low chant started somewhere in the back, soft at first, then growing as boots tapped the deck. Mechanical lover. Mechanical lover. Merrick pinched the bridge of his nose. I hate all of you, he said, though the corner of his mouth betrayed him. But fine. 30 seconds. Then everyone gets back to work before I remember I'm in charge. But even Merrick's warning could not take the grin off Lorne's face. The Featherheads kept calling his new call sign from the railings. The ground pounders slapped his shoulder hard enough to make him stagger. A mechanic walked past DEATHCORE 5, patted the fighter's battered nose, and said, Looks like the ugly bird finally found someone dumb enough to understand her. Lorne looked up at the scarred starfighter, still hearing the echo of the training lock tone in his ears, and for the first time since Merrick had given him the cockpit, he felt something shift around him. He was still the rookie, still mechanical lover, still one bad joke away from another punishment detail. But after that flight, Docking Bay 12 had started looking at him like he belonged there. Chapter 19. After the cheering finally died down, Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam remained in Aviation Command Control, her eyes still on the recovery deck below as she waited for Major Merrick to return. When he stepped back into the control room, still wearing the rough pride of Lorne's successful flight, Yuna turned toward him with the calm weight of command and the familiarity of an old friend. Merrick, she said, do not ever forget that you are responsible for 400 squadrons now. Do not favor your old aviation unit just because it carries your memories. Hammer Squadron, Rapture Squadron, Phoenix Squadron, and Void Squadron all answer to you now. Every one of them deserves the same discipline, the same attention, and the same chance to become more than a name on a roster. Merrick's pride faded slowly, not because Yuna had embarrassed him, but because every word landed exactly where it needed to. He looked down through the armored glass at the recovery deck, where DEATHCORE 5 still sat in her cradle, and Lorne was surrounded by pilots who were already turning one good flight into a legend. For a moment, Merrick saw Roberts again, saw the fire around his fighter, heard the static that followed the last order ever given to him in battle. His old squadron had always been the wound he protected most fiercely. Yuna knew that. Worse, she knew when he was letting that wound choose for him. He drew in a slow breath and straightened, the familiar crooked grin nowhere to be found. You are right, he said quietly. DEATHCORE 5, Lorne, the old aviation unit. They matter to me. Maybe too much sometimes. His jaw tightened, but he did not look away from Yuna. Roberts died saving pilots like me. Ever since then, I keep looking at every rookie out of my old unit, like I can pay that debt backward if I just push hard enough. Yuna's expression softened, though her voice remained firm. Merrick understood that look. It was not pity. It was command, refusing to let an old friend hide inside grief. He looked back down at the bay again, then beyond, it in his mind, toward the squadrons whose names Yuna had spoken. Hammer, Rapture, Phoenix, and Void. 400 squadrons, thousands of pilots, crews, mechanics, and officers who would never know Roberts personally, but who still deserved a commander who treated their lives as more than assignments on a tactical chart. I will not fail them, Merrick said at last. This time his voice carried more than obedience. It carried acceptance. Hammer Squadron gets my full attention. Rapture gets it. Phoenix gets it. Void gets it. All 400 squadrons. No favorites. No ghosts flying the roster for me. He gave Yuna a short, respectful nod, the kind that belonged as much to old friendship as it did to rank. If I start slipping, Admiral, call me on it. Hard. Yuna held his gaze for another moment, then nodded once. I will, she said. Because I know you can carry this command, Merrick. I just need you to remember that carrying it means looking past the squadron that made you and seeing the fleet, depending on you now. Merrick looked back toward the deck, where Lorne was still surrounded by laughter, then lifted his chin with the steady resolve of a man finally stepping out from under an old battlefield's shadow. Then I had better start acting like the man in charge of 400 squadrons, he said, not just the survivor of one. Yuna let the hardness in the moment ease, if only by a fraction. Her mouth curved into a faint smile as she looked back down toward the recovery deck. Anyway, Major, she said, a quiet laugh touching the edge of her voice. I'm proud of Lorne, too. If he keeps flying like that, then in 2 years, he may very well earn his way to first lieutenant. Her smile faded just enough to make the praise feel heavier. But talent like his never stays simple. The better he becomes, the more the fleet will expect from him, and the more the sky will take notice. One good flight earned him cheers today. The next challenges will ask whether he can keep flying when no one is laughing, when the old bird fights him, when his squadron needs him, and when fear starts making decisions for everyone else. Merrick followed her gaze to the recovery deck, where Lorne still stood near DEATHCORE 5 with the glow of victory clinging to him. I will see to it that he keeps his head in the game under pure pressure, Merrick said. His voice was steady now, stripped of humor. If that kid is going to carry a legend, then I will make sure he learns how heavy one can get before the real space or skies tries to break him. Later, Fleet Admiral Yuna Adam returned to the bridge of the Romulus, her expression once again carrying the calm authority that made every officer straighten before she spoke. Through the forward viewport, Planet Epsilon turned beneath them, and above it waited Epsilon's massive orbital dreadnought station, an armored docking platform built for vessels so large that anything smaller looked like a support craft by comparison. Only a dreadnought of the Romulus class could use the station's primary cradle, with its reinforced magnetic locks, kilometer-wide service arms, and hull braces designed to hold an ancient warship in place without insulting her pride. Yuna opened the shipwide channel and let her voice carry through every deck, corridor, barracks compartment, hangar bay, and ground unit staging area. All hands, this is Fleet Admiral Adam. Effective immediately, we will begin a rotation schedule for rest and training on Epsilon. Ship personnel will cycle down by department, and the same rotation applies to the ground units. No one skips recovery, no one skips drills, And no one argues with medical about needing sleep. A faint ripple of amusement moved through the bridge, but no one mistook the order for a suggestion. Commander Jerry Ford's reaction was immediate and quietly approving. He folded his arms, looked over the duty displays, and gave a short nod that carried more relief than he probably intended to show. "About damn time," he muttered, low enough for only Yuna and the nearest bridge officers to hear. "Half this crew has been running on discipline, caffeine, and stubbornness since Earth. A proper rotation might keep them from trying to salute a bulkhead by mistake." Yuna's mouth curved faintly, but her eyes remained on the bridge. Jerry's humor softened into something more serious as he glanced toward the younger officers at their stations. "They earned this, Admiral. Ship crew and ground units both. Rest them now. Train them hard after, and they will come back sharper." Yuna glanced toward him then. "Commander Jerry Ford, you are with me. Leave a skeleton crew aboard so the ship does not feel lonely. We are heading to the old man's former office at Epsilon Barracks Main Command for more file reviews." Within minutes, the rotation orders moved through the fleet. Crew manifests updated, and the Romulus settled into the Dreadnought Station's enormous cradle with a distant metallic thunder that rolled through her decks like the station was greeting an old giant home. The first duty teams prepared for transfer, while Yuna and Jerry crossed to the launch bay, boarded a small dropship, and descended toward Epsilon, leaving the Romulus docked high above the planet, with just enough crew aboard to keep the ancient dreadnought awake, guarded, and quietly listening. Before Yuna and Jerry could clear the launch bay threshold, 2 bright chimes rang through the Romulus speakers at the exact same time. Rhea and Destiny spoke in perfect unison, their voices lifting into a mock, sorrowful little tune that echoed across every deck. "I'm Miss Lonely, they sang together, dragging the words out with theatrical misery. For one split second, the entire Romulus crew froze. Bridge officers stopped over their consoles. Mechanics paused with tools in hand. Ground unit troopers looked up from their gear. Even the pilots checking rotation assignments went still, as if the ancient dreadnought herself had just made an official emotional complaint. Then the silence shattered. Laughter rolled through the ship from deck to deck, loud enough to follow the rotation teams as they gathered their bags, checked schedules, and prepared to cycle down to Epsilon. Yuna stopped at the dropship ramp and looked toward the ceiling with a flat, long-suffering stare. Jerry Ford, already fighting a grin, muttered, "Leave a skeleton crew," she said. "So the ship will not feel lonely," she said. Rhea answered sweetly, "Correction, Commander Jerry Ford. We feel tragically abandoned." Destiny added, "Temporarily neglected by our favorite troublemakers." Yuna shook her head, but the faint smile at the corner of her mouth betrayed her. "Try not to file a loneliness report before we get back," she said. "No promises," Rhea and Destiny replied together. Yuna stepped onto the dropship ramp, then turned back toward the bay, raising her voice so every nearby crew member, pilot, mechanic, and ground unit trooper could hear her final words before she left. "Listen up, DEATHCORE. Rest hard, train harder, and do not let Rhea and Destiny convince you to start a sympathy committee for Lonely AIS while I am gone. I expect this crew sharper, louder, and somehow still alive when I return." She looked up toward the nearest speaker and added, "And you two, behave like responsible adults for at least 5 minutes." Rhea and Destiny answered in perfect unison. "Define responsible." Yuna gave Jerry a tired look. "That is exactly what I was afraid of." The laughter chased Yuna and Jerry all the way into the dropship as the Romulus settled into her rotation schedule with one ancient ship, one mischievous sister, AI, and an entire crew still laughing while they got ready for rest and training. Yuna and Ford launched from the Romulus Bay in a sharp burst of engine fire, the dropship cutting away from the dreadnought station and angling hard toward planet Epsilon below. The planet's blue-gray atmosphere rushed up to meet them, growing brighter across the forward viewport as the pilot pushed the descent faster than standard entry protocols allowed. Warning lights flickered across the cockpit just as Epsilon Control broke through the comms. "Dropship Romulus, you are coming in too hot. Slow your approach vector. I repeat, slow approach vector upon planetary entry." The pilot snapped one hand across the controls and answered without taking his eyes off the descent line. "I'll slow it down a bit, Control. I need to go shit. And the admiral is sort of in a hurry." Ford closed his eyes for one long second. Yuna only stared toward the cockpit and muttered, "Professionalism continues to be alive and well in my fleet." Ford opened his eyes again and looked toward Yuna with the long-suffering patience of a man who had survived every possible version of military stupidity. "You realize that pilot just broadcast his digestive emergency to planetary control." Yuna did not look away from the viewport. "I am choosing to believe it was a morale tactic." "A morale tactic?" Ford repeated. "He announced he needed to go shit while entering atmosphere at unsafe speed." "And yet everyone is awake now," Yuna said. Ford stared at her for a beat, then sighed. Edison would have rewritten half the flight manual over that sentence. Yuna's expression softened at the name. No. Edison would have stared at the pilot until the man apologized to the cockpit, the tower, and the concept of discipline itself. Ford gave a quiet chuckle. Then, he would have made me file the incident report. "Naturally," Yuna said. "You always had the handwriting of a man who deserved paperwork." Ford turned his head slowly. "Admiral, that may be the cruelest thing you have ever said to me." Her faint smile lasted only a moment before the blue-gray surface of Epsilon filled more of the viewport. "We joke now," she said, voice lowering, "because that office will not feel funny once we get there." Ford followed her gaze toward the planet. "Edison's old files." "Yes," Yuna said, and whatever else the old man thought, I was finally ready to understand. Ford's humor faded completely. "Then let us hope he left answers." Yuna's eyes reflected the planet below. "With Edison, Jerry, even the answers usually came dressed as warnings. The channel stayed open for 3 full seconds longer than it should have. Epsilon Control did not answer at first. Somewhere behind the pilot, the dropship's co-pilot slowly turned in his seat and stared at him with the dead-eyed horror of a man watching his career paperwork multiply in real time. Then the control tower came back on, far too professional to be natural. "Acknowledged, dropship Romulus. Medical, sanitation, and command dignity have been notified of your emergency." Ford lowered his hand over his face. Yuna's eyes narrowed. The pilot went very still. "Control," he said carefully. "Was that on the open approach channel?" A second voice from the tower cut in, barely holding back laughter. "Affirmative. Also, docking control, barracks command, and 3 training squadrons heard you." From the rear compartment, one Marine started laughing so hard his harness rattled. Yuna leaned forward just enough for the pilot to see her reflection in the cockpit glass. "Congratulations," she said. "Your bathroom schedule is now classified as a fleet morale event." The dropship hit the upper atmosphere with a hard shudder, then steadied as the pilot finally obeyed Epsilon Control and eased the descent angle into something that would not make safety officers start writing death threats. The open channel incident followed them all the way down. By the time the landing struts touched the pad outside Epsilon Barracks' main command, 3 separate tower operators had wished the pilot luck with his urgent biological mission, and 1 maintenance tech had cleared a path to the nearest restroom with military efficiency. The pilot did not look back as the ramp lowered. He only muttered, "I hate every one of you." and hurried off across the pad, while Ford watched him go with exhausted disbelief. Yuna stepped onto Epsilon's landing deck, the wind catching the edge of her coat as she looked toward the fortified command complex ahead. "At least he followed orders eventually," she said. Ford gave her a sidelong look. "That is the lowest standard I have ever heard you praise." Epsilon Barracks, main command, rose from the reinforced plateau like a memory carved out of steel and stone. Its outer walls bore the marks of decades of upgrades, wartime expansions, and quiet repairs that had never fully hidden the scars of older conflicts. Yuna and Ford crossed the landing pad under escort, passing young officers who snapped to attention the moment they recognized the fleet admiral. Some saluted with perfect discipline. Others stared a fraction too long, as if seeing Yuna Adam in person made history uncomfortable to stand beside. Yuna returned the salutes without slowing. She had walked these corridors before as Vice Admiral, as the successor Edison had named, and later as the woman who inherited both his rank and the unfinished burdens he left behind. The door to Edison's old office opened only after Yuna pressed her command seal to the panel. For a moment, the room beyond remained dark. Then the lights warmed slowly, revealing the preserved command desk, the sealed archive cabinets, the old service banners, and the same dusty stillness that had greeted her at the beginning of all this. Nothing had changed. That was what made it harder. The office had waited while fleets moved, worlds armed themselves, AIS chose names, rookies earned call signs, and the shadow of the dark rising crept closer from beyond the galaxy. Edison's chair still sat behind the desk, as if he might return at any moment, stern-eyed and calm, ready to ask why everyone was making so much noise in his command building. Ford stepped in behind her and let the door seal. The humor from the dropship ride faded from his face as soon as he looked at the desk. "Feels strange coming back here after everything," he said. Yuna moved to the center of the office, her eyes passing over the old banners and the archive cabinets. "It felt strange the first time," she replied. "Now it feels like the room is waiting for me to understand something he already knew." Ford did not answer quickly. He knew exactly what she meant. Every corridor in this building seemed to remember Fleet Admiral Edison, but this room remembered him most clearly. "Then we read the files," Ford said, "and hoped the old man left us more answers than warnings." Yuna placed her hand on the edge of Edison's desk. The surface was cold beneath her fingers. "With Edison," she said quietly, "the warnings usually were the answers." "All right, Ford, let's get to work," Yuna said, turning toward Edison's old desk. Ford looked around the preserved office, then gave a tired nod. "Yeah, I was afraid you were going to say that." Yuna glanced toward the doorway. "I'll have one of the service bots bring us coffee from one of Epsilon's cafe shops." Ford's expression brightened just enough to prove he was still human. "Sure, why not? If we're digging through the old man's files, we might as well be properly caffeinated before the ghosts start yelling at us." Yuna gave him a dry look. "If Edison's ghost starts yelling, I'm blaming you." A few minutes later, a small service bot rolled into the office with a polite chime and stopped beside Ford. Its display blinked to life. "Order request. Commander Jerry Ford." Ford leaned toward it. "Largest coffee you can legally serve on this planet. Black. No sugar. No cream. And if you have anything that tastes like regret but keeps me awake, add that too." The service bot paused for 1 full second. "Processing. Commander Ford has ordered. Coffee. Black. Maximum size. Emotional damage optional." Yuna did not look up from the desk. "Accurate." Ford pointed at the bot. "Do not encourage her.